Fellas have the morning off. I'm Pierre Boyles, and good morning, everyone. It's November the 29th, 2024, a Friday morning. And here we go. And we had a low down mic. Weather's good. 43 will be the high today. 18 tonight, 47 on Saturday, and 48 degrees on Sunday. I've been wanting to do this for such a long time, and about once or twice a year, actually get to do it, but nothing is as close to the terrible day of November the 23rd, 1963, and so much more now has appeared in the murder, the assassination, the hit of John Kennedy in Dallas. And many people that are listening to the radio show this morning maybe were even not alive that fall morning of 63. Jack Kennedy and his political advisors are going to the next presidential campaign. Jack Kennedy has not formally announced his candidacy, but it's clear he's going to run, and he seems confident about his chances for re-election. In September, the president travels west. He speaks at 9 different states that week. The trip was meant to put a spotlight on natural resources and conservation efforts. Think about today. Also, John Kennedy also used it to sound out themes: education, national security, world peace, in his run for 64. And then, of course, they head for Dallas. We need to break for the Blake Olson report, but our phone number, 303-696-1971. I thought this would be good. And by the way, our first guest is coming up quickly. And then there's a new book, The Last Honest Man, about Frank Church. And the Church Commission looked at the FBI and the CIA and the mafia and the Kennedys, and indeed they came to their same conclusions. But if I were to ask you, what organization did these men make up? Richard Russell, who of course was the Democrat senator from Georgia. Let's see who else was in this group. There's Richard Russell, Hale Boggs, there's a name, remember Hale Boggs, Democrat from Louisiana. Gerald Ford, young congressman from Michigan. Alan Dulles, the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency. And John Cooper, Republican senator from Kentucky. What organization did they make up? 710 KNUS. Good morning, everybody. Peter Boyles. It's going to be, I think, a really special morning. Your calls are really welcome. 43 will be the high. 18 tonight. We got Blake ready. All right, let's do the news and come back. But who are those men and why?
At this hour, I'm Christina Ohio in Dallas, and here are your top stories. The holiday shopping season is about to reach full speed with Black Friday, which kicks off the post-Thanksgiving retail rush.
The annual sales event no longer creates the midnight mall crowds or doorbuster mayhem of recent decades. That's due in large part to the ease of online shopping and habits forged during the COVID-19 pandemic. Hoping to entice equivocating consumers, retailers already have spent weeks bombarding customers with ads and early offers.
The Pew Research Center says women in the United States are outpacing men in getting bachelor's degrees. And that's true in every major racial and ethnic group, although the size of the gap varies widely. Back in 1995, 25% of both young men and women held a bachelor's degree. Now, 47% of women ages 25 to 34 in the U.S. have a bachelor's degree, but only 37% of men have one. A firefighter in Colorado grew a pumpkin so big that it broke a state record. Brad Bledsoe has made a hobby of growing gigantic pumpkins, and he has names for some of them, too. The one named after the Hocus Pocus sisters weighs more than 2,000 pounds, which is enough to break the state record. Bledsoe told local media that his first pumpkin weighed 195 pounds. The next one he's growing is set to top 2,200 pounds. That's what you need to know at this hour. In Dallas, Christina Ohio, Salem News Channel.
It is. It is Friday morning, November the 29th, 2024. ago, the 23rd of November, 1963. I'm Peter Boyles. Good morning, everyone. Lines are open, 303-696-1971. This is one of those significant parts of what we're going to talk about today. But who are these men? Put together, who are these men? Richard Russell, the Democrat senator from Georgia. John Cooper, Republican senator from Kentucky. Hale Boggs, well, there's a name. Hale Boggs, Democrat representing Louisiana. Gerald R. Ford, representing Michigan, young congressman from Michigan. And Alan Dulles, the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency. What do they make up? 710 KNUS. We got already getting some text messaging. I agree with the text messenger, RFK Jr. This is one of the reasons I wanted to do the show. Did you see that piece where I forget who by the way, did you hear Dan Rather died? Dan Rather died over the weekend. One of the interviewers said to our RFK Jr., did the CIA kill your uncle? And he just didn't even, there was no emotion. He just said yes. And it was the beginning of why I'm thinking, well, let's get RFK Jr. in and let him get a look at it. But that moment, that second, the John F. Kennedy assassination changes the direction of the country. Now, like as I mentioned, there's a new book, The Last Honest Man, the CIA, the FBI, the Mafia, the Kennedys, and one senator's fight to save democracy. I absolutely love this book. I finished it. There's a woman that we've spent a lot of time with. She's a researcher, and she's in Texas, and she'll speak to us as well. John F. Kennedy assassination just springs forward almost everything. And the things that people believe Kennedy would have never allowed to have happen, Lyndon Johnson did. And it's fascinating, the stuff with organized crime, the Kennedys, Joe Kennedy, Papa Joe, the ambassador, Sam Giancana, all those people. And then eventually they're murdered as they get ready to appear before the select committee. And Johnny Rosselli gets killed, Sam Giancana gets killed. They do not want organized crime coming forward. They do. And organized crime has such power in this country. So let's begin. 303-696-1971. Hey, Bill, you're on a radio show. Thank you and good morning. Yes. Yeah.
I found that very interesting because they had a thing by a pedestrian there showing that there was a shot just before
Hmm?
stops and there was his head got hit again. Basically, confirming that there were two shooters.
I believe that.
And then the other thing, of course, is state law in Texas was if you have a murder like that they had to do the autopsy in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
and they moved his body
right.
out of Texas and put it on a plane, and the autopsy. In other words, there's too many mysteries surrounding the post-shooting. It appears to be a cover-up of some kind.
It's one of the great mysteries of our country's history, let alone the world, because it would have, this all affected the world. In your gut, and we're going to talk with a woman here coming up in just a second, woman historian, Katanna's with us, but they're calling into question now the theory of the lone gunman, and they're exploring how JFK's assassination continues to live. And now this belief, and I was reading about it last night, that the famous Zapruder film, that Super 8 film, that it itself had been not censored, had been cut And they presented yet a different film than the one that was the original film. The whole thing just fascinates me. A lot of it's because of organized crime and Joe Kennedy Sr., the old man. But because she's coming on here in just a moment, well, maybe somebody does have a guess on who these people are. Think this through, and take a shot at it. What organization did Richard Russell, John Sherman Cooper, Hale Boggs, Gerald Ford, and Alan Dulles make up?
Well,
take a shot.
I think it has something to do with the CIA.
Probably does, but it's the Warren Commission.
Oh, the Warren Commission.
It's the Warren Commission. But if you look at these names,
that was a joke.
No, it was a joke. No one, well, at the time, the Warren Commission, officially known as I think it was the President's Commission on the Assassination of President Kennedy, and it was a group appointed by Lyndon Johnson to investigate the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And he put these people together who oftentimes hated each other. In fact, Richard Russell hated Earl Warren because of the 1954 Brown versus School Board that begins in Topeka, Kansas, that begins to end segregation. And so Richard Russell, who was a hardcore segregationist, but of all the people on the commission, Alan Dulles, who was the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, and Jack Kennedy had fired him. Now, why would Lyndon Johnson pick him to put him on the commission? Because they wanted, according to about 20 different people that I've read, they had their conclusion and they worked to their conclusion. In other words, they knew what they wanted to say. And
one last thing, Pete.
Surely.
We keep hearing newly elected presidential candidates, hey, we're going to open the books.
That's right. That's right.
And they never do. They never get there.
Including Donald Trump.
Including Donald Trump, who I coincidentally voted for, still doesn't do it. Now, he's as I understand it, he said once again that he's going to do that. I don't believe it.
The one guy, by the way, with apologies, Dan Rather, it's his wife Jean passed away. It was on the wire, and I saw it. So it is Jean. Oh. Jean Rather passed away. Every one of these guys makes that promise, and every one of them has to go the other way. What is it, do you think, that's in there? And I mean, we talk about the deep state now all the time.
Well, my guess, once again, redundantly, would be it goes back to the CIA, and they can't take the chance of revealing that our own government was involved in the assassination of a president.
The organized crime, anti-Castro Cubans, and he had to go.
Yep.
I mean, to me, it's like it changes the course of everything that will happen in your life and my life. If you're old enough, and I am. But
where were you on that day?
Working in the steel mill.
And I was in sophomore in civics class, and getting ready to go to lunch, and they announced over the PA system.
I remember it so well. There was a guy that came up on the furnace, and I thought it was a joke. He said, "Did you hear the president's been shot?" And I thought it was the opening, on a joke line, and I would say, "No, what?" And then he would say something, and that would be the joke. That was my initial reaction. And he said, "No, he's dead." And all of a sudden, in the time houses up on the furnaces, they had radios in there, and guys started to turn on the radios. And he was Irish, and he was Catholic, and he was the savior to so many people. But
and to my mind, that was an introduction to the craziness of the 60s and the background.
Absolutely.
We're heavily involved in Vietnam
Absolutely.
since probably 55 post-World War II.
54,
and then,
yes.
Yeah, and it just rolls from there.
And all the stuff on organized crime goes away. Bobby Kennedy's investigations that it was interesting to see this RFK Jr. guy that I'm drawn to reading about him. And here he is, I think is he 8 or 9 years old, and his favorite uncle gets murdered. And I think he's between 12 or 14, I'm not sure. And his father gets murdered. And then, he ends up a junkie. His wife, I think, hangs herself. It's just one thing after another in his life. How long, Bill, do you think he's waited to get his hands on the reins?
Well, I would, from the state of his consciousness and awareness of everything around him, I would suppose, probably quite young.
He's been waiting one way or another. And Trump is going to cut him loose and just say, and he's one of the ones who promises that he will show us the paperwork. And I don't know what's in there. I don't know what they're going to say or what we're going to be able to read. I think we know most of it. It's like the stupidity of the Netflix stuff on the Ramsey case. We know the answers to every stupid thing these people are asking. Patsy
I tried to watch that last night, and
it's horrible.
I couldn't.
Patsy Ramsey killed the kid, and John helped her. It's boom. And I can't believe the quote reporters who are willing to sit down there and play dog for Netflix. It's beyond us. So anyhow,
I kept thinking of you as the Paula Woodward and the other gals. I kept thinking of you.
They hate me. There was going to be a symposium on that murder, and I was invited to go to the symposium, and they were going to do one on Alan Berg's murder. And my understanding is that the attorneys who were putting it on said, "We will not show up if you bring Boyles into the room." Seriously, which makes me feel good, but
I believe that. But after 62 years, it's time the American people, we deserve an answer. Or that information needs to be released.
More than agreed. Thank you, sir. Have a great weekend. Is Katanna ready? She can come and join us now, or what after the break? Okay. Now, I met this woman. Her name is Katanna Zachry. And she's it's called Lonestar Speaks. I have her book at my house, the Untold Stories about the JFK assassination. Wait for her. And then I finished this book, The Last Honest Man, about Frank Church. Now, I'll just give you the front. The CIA, the FBI, the mafia, the Kennedys, and one senator's fight to save democracy. And the person himself is Frank Church. Frank Church dies young. Frank Church of Idaho was eyeing the presidency when, in the wake of Watergate, I'm reading this, he was tasked with a far different challenge, investigating the abuses of power of the CIA. The dark truth, and again, I did not write this, I'm reading it. The dark truth that Frank Church, not the church, but Frank Church, exposed from assassination plots by the CIA to links between the Kennedy dynasty and the mafia, and the surveillance of civil rights activists by NSA and FBI would shake the nation to its core, forever changing the way Americans thought about their government and their ability to hold it accountable. And it's just a great book. And The Last Honest Man. After this on 710 KNUS.
Mostly sunny to partly sunny skies and fair weather today. Daytime high temperatures are going to be in the 40s, lows tonight teens and 20s, mid to upper 40s Saturday, 40s and 50s Sunday. So a dry stretch of weather today through the weekend here in Denver, and that trend continues. Likely going to be well into the 50s, lows 20s, and dry Monday through Wednesday and next week. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
At this hour, I'm Christina Owayo in Dallas, and here are your top stories. The holiday shopping season is about to reach full speed with Black Friday, which kicks off the post-Thanksgiving retail rush.
The annual sales event no longer creates the midnight mall crowds or doorbuster mayhem of recent decades. That's due in large part to the ease of online shopping and habits forged during the COVID-19 pandemic. Hoping to entice equivocating consumers, retailers already have spent weeks bombarding customers with ads and early offers.
The Pew Research Center says women in the United States are outpacing men in getting bachelor's degrees. And that's true in every major racial and ethnic group, although the size of the gap varies widely. Back in 1995, 25% of both young men and women held a bachelor's degree. Now 47% of women ages 25 to 34 in the U.S. have a bachelor's degree, but only 37% of men have one. A firefighter in Colorado grew a pumpkin so big that it broke a state record. Brad Bledsoe has made a hobby of growing gigantic pumpkins, and he has names for some of them too. The one named after the Hocus Pocus sisters weighs more than 2,000 pounds, which is enough to break the state record. Bledsoe told local media that his first pumpkin weighed 195 pounds. The next one he's growing is set to top 2,200 pounds. That's what you need to know at this hour. In Dallas, Christina Owayo, Salem News Channel.
Good morning. It's a Friday. I'm Peter Boyles in for the fellas. Friday, November 29, 2024, 710 KNUS. The weather, cool and dry and 43, 18 tonight and 47 on Saturday, 48 degrees on Sunday. We are talking about those many years ago, 1963, the murder, the assassination, the hit on Jack Kennedy. One of my favorites, and I don't even know when we met, but she's just always been wonderful. Her name is Katanna Zachry. She lives in Texas. Ms. Zachry, first, happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, and welcome back to Denver.
Thank you, Peter. It's good to hear your voice.
You too, ma'am. You as well. I was mentioning just before the pause, I just finished this remarkable book entitled The Last Honest Man about Frank Church.
Yes, I've read that.
Oh, you have? And also about the Rockefeller Commission, which
Yes.
Yeah. I don't want to steal this guy's thunder, but they knew, didn't they? I mean, certainly Frank Church knew.
Yes, and there were things that he was disappointed in his friend Jack Kennedy having been involved in that he didn't want to actually come out. But yes, he did find out things about the CIA mafia connections that no American would have wanted to think had happened, but it did, and they had proof of it.
Whomever murders Johnny Rosselli and then murders Sam Giancana.
Yes.
And why were those two men murdered?
Well, both of them were scheduled to speak to the committee, and I don't think either one of them would have said a word, but it's possible that they might have. Now, we interviewed a man named Bernie Sindler,
Sure,
who had been close to the mob. He told me, and he told this over the telephone from his hospital room, and I was sitting at a Las Vegas hotel out by the pool, and people kept giving me the oddest looks because I'd say, "You're saying that the FBI had Johnny Rosselli killed?" And people would turn around and look at me like, "Who on earth are you talking to?" But yes, that is what he said. He said the mob would not have done this in that manner and probably wouldn't have done it at all to Johnny Rosselli. They thought too much of him. But the FBI would have.
Johnny got chopped up and put in a 55-gallon oil drum, thrown into...
strangled.
Yes.
Yeah, he's been strangled.
And thrown into dumbfoundling. And then because of, this sounds horrible, because of the body gases being released, he floated to the top, right?
Yes, horrible, horrible.
Who do you think killed? I mean, they had to know Sam Giancana. They had to get in. And by the way, Giancana was sharing a woman, Judith Exter Campbell. They were lovers. Sam Giancana, Judy Campbell, and Jack Kennedy.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Well, that's something that some people are still in denial about, but they finally found that she had made about 70 phone calls to the White House through Evelyn Lincoln. And being the dedicated, loyal employee that Lincoln was, she denied that she ever reached Jack Kennedy. But you don't have records of these phone calls going to someone's private number if you didn't have that private number to begin with. So that tells you a lot right there. The idea that Kennedy was that much of a risk taker seemed unbelievable at the time. But the more we find out about the risk he did take, he was that much of a risk taker. He thought he was above the law to a certain extent.
And he also thought he was going to die.
Yes, so he really didn't seem to worry. He told one of his friends, he said, "Who cares what that comes out after I'm dead?"
Yeah. But Marilyn Monroe was doing much the same. She was making phone calls too, was she not?
Oh yes, until they cut her off, which, you don't do that. That really, that causes lots of problems when you just suddenly will not take phone calls from someone.
Did Jackie, I mean, I've read so much of this stuff. Did Jackie Kennedy actually speak on the best of your knowledge, speak on the phone with Marilyn Monroe?
That I don't know.
Okay.
Now, I've heard that a woman kept calling Marilyn saying, "Leave Bobby alone."
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think that would have been Ethel, although I can see her being upset enough to have done it. But I think Marilyn would have recognized Ethel's accent. But I could see it possibly being a friend of the Kennedys saying, "Leave Bobby alone."
Bobby and Jack traded her, didn't they?
From what people on the inside said, yes.
Was she murdered? Listen to me jumping everywhere. Yeah.
I would guess she was helped out of this life. Yes.
What a thing to say. I like that. Helped out of this life. I think I think they murdered her. Do you think Peter Lawford knew that she had been murdered?
Yes, and I think he literally was scared to death for the rest of his life.
I think so as well. And when Frank Sinatra cuts him out, and then he's just and Jack's gone and Bobby's gone.
Well, there's no one to protect him.
Thank you. And he's just a beat dog.
And think about it. I mean, after Bobby's dead, who would have taken literally taken all the blame for having even been there? Since he supposedly did go with Bobby over there, and
he was at her house. They were at their house, right?
Yes, and there is some personal anecdotal evidence that the director William Asher knew about this, who later was married to Liz Montgomery, because he was the one who had directed the birthday party in May. He was close to the Kennedys, and he had been invited to Lawford's house the night that Marilyn died. So I think he too knew that there were some iffy things going on, but who wanted to know that for sure and be called and have to testify under oath? Not that the LA police were going to ever let that happen.
I want to begin at the beginning. This is a very special woman. She has been with us before. Her name is Katanna Zachry. She has a writing partner and historian in Texas. I just finished a book entitled The 60s, and it principally plays out with organized crime and the Kennedys when it's Richard Nixon running against Jack Kennedy, and the old man Joe Kennedy's connections to the mob, that they hooked West Virginia, and then they brought in Cook County. And I met the Giancanas. This is how much of this quote so-called career that I've spent trying to listen to people like yourself who talk about this. But the Giancanas wrote a book called Double Cross.
Yes, I've read that.
There you go. I met the Giancanas.
Well, I have a friend who's very close to Antoinette Giancana.
I interviewed her too. Yeah.
Would she tell you very much? She's pretty close-mouthed, really.
I asked her, and she calls herself Twinette.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
And I said, "What did you think that your father did for a living?" Now, her father's Sam Giancana, and her mother had passed away. And she said, "We were in the hospitality business." I swear that's what she said, like tablecloths and stuff for restaurants.
Oh, well, that's a good front.
No, that's really what she told me. And if you pushed in on stuff like you and I are talking about, she didn't want to do she said, "Look, I'll hang up." What were we going to talk about? The euro? I wanted to talk about her father. She loved her father and said just glowing things.
Right.
About what a wonderful man Sam Giancana was.
And there were people that knew him who did see that side of him. And I guess, you could have two sides to your personality, the business side and the personal side.
But he was sharing, and actually, I met Anthony Summers once also and had a long conversation with Anthony Summers in that book, Goddess, about Marilyn Monroe, and how they treated her in the end of her life in, where are they? They're in Las Vegas, not in Las Vegas, but in Nevada. It's in Tahoe, I believe. And
that was despicable, really.
Then you've read that as well, and that was that was Sinatra. And what role did Frank Sinatra play in all of this?
Well, I think he was the one that connected the two of them together to begin with. And you have to wonder if he didn't do it deliberately, maybe with a little bit of his sense of humor of, well, hey, what's wrong with connecting the president of the United States or the future president up with a call girl who also hangs out and sleeps with Sam Giancana? And, why not and I think he knew Kennedy well enough to know that Kennedy would get the humor in this, see the dark side of this humor, and then whether she was actually used as a carrier, maybe she exaggerated her own.
I've read that.
I don't know. She could have been, and she could have been without knowing it. That happens sometimes.
I've read that she muled money between organized crime in Chicago and the Kennedy campaign.
That's what I've read too.
Yeah.
And who would be a better carrier than a beautiful brunette that nobody would look at twice, other than literally leering at her, to think she'd be carrying a briefcase with $1 million. But one time Peter Lawford showed Sammy Davis Jr. He said, "You want to see what $1 million looks like?" And he opened the closet and showed him.
There it was. There's a really
somebody's carrying this money.
There's a really weird sidebar story that I've finished this book on Hoffman. I by self-admission, I'm a kind of a Jimmy Hoffa fan. So to get out of the penitentiary, and Nixon needed money, and that his son Chucky O'Brien carried $1 million worth of Teamster funds to Chuck Colson to get Nixon, and that was the payback for Hoffa giving Nixon a pardon, giving Jimmy Hoffa a pardon.
I can see that happening.
When I read it, I said the same thing. Of course that happened. I mean, what is wrong with us, Katanna, that when we read those things, well, of course that happened.
Well, I think we've all become so jaded about how politics works and has worked for decades and decades and decades, maybe longer, that it's not surprising anymore. Not to mention when I asked Iris Campbell, who had worked with Cliff Carter, Lyndon's big aide, how y'all, and she didn't even deny this. I said, how did you get away with stealing Illinois and things like that? And she said, Nixon couldn't do anything. He was working with the mafia too.
And he had been seeing a psychiatrist.
Yes. So there were records of some of the things that he had been talking about too.
There's a word for Bobby Kennedy that begins with a P. And Bobby Kennedy, when they knew, Nixon had them. I mean, Nixon had the West Virginia primary that they had fixed that, and that Daley had brought in Cook County. And Bobby Kennedy went to him and said, sure, go ahead. And because it was a real stigma in 1962 to tell people that you went to therapy.
Yes.
And so they had them. They dead bang had them. And that's right. And I also said Nixon had a foot in the other world too, did he not?
Yes, from what I've heard. Well, one of the interesting, but who Ben Bradley was,
absolutely,
the news reporter, Watergate.
Yes,
he thought was fairly good friends with Kennedy, and when he first wrote Conversations with Kennedy, he left out lots of interesting stories. But later he wrote his memoir, A Good Life, and in that he told about Jack Kennedy telling him. He said, well, the election still hadn't been called. They didn't know who was going to win. They were worried about Illinois. And Kennedy gave Mayor Richard Daley, a call. And he said, how's it look there? And he said, well, Mr. President. So that made him the first person to call him that.
Wow.
He said, Mr. President, with some luck and some help from some friends, you're going to carry Illinois, Chicago, this area. And he did. And when you tie that in with the book by Gus Russo called "Where Were You?" and
I read that. I read that book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gus does great research. There's also a chapter where the son of Richard Daley talks about he and his family were the first people invited to Jack Kennedy's Oval Office for an informal visit. Is that coincidence? I don't think so.
A coinkydink. As I love being with you. West Virginia. We get a minute. Why don't we do this? How's your time? Can you stay for about maybe a week and a half?
No, not quite that long.
It's Katanna Zachry. She spells her last name Zachry. And what part of Texas are you in again? I forgot.
In West Texas, home of the Dixie Mafia.
Oh, it is the home of the Dixie Mafia. It's like, I bet it's organized crime that brings in West Virginia, proving that a Catholic can beat a Protestant, i.e. Hubert Humphrey. And then it begins. Hang on, ma'am, if you would. Put her up on hold, would you please? 303-696-1971. Don't forget the Children's Hospital annual toy run. The 39th time is December the 8th. We'll talk with Robbie Farrow about that this morning. Coming up, a remarkable book entitled The Last Honest Man. The CIA, the FBI, the Mafia, and the Kennedys, and one senator's fight to save democracy. It is going to be 43. I'm Peter Boyles. This is 710 KNUS. Morning, everybody. It's Friday, the 29th morning of November 2024. 710 KNUS Denver's Talk Station with Peter Boyles. 43 the high, 18 tonight, 47 Saturday, and 48 on Sunday. I've been wanting to do this off the air now, except for getting to do my Saturday show, and I've gotten this opportunity. The fellas are off, and I look back now again at the November 22nd, 63, Jack Kennedy assassinated. He's traveling in a motorcade in an open-top limo in Dallas, Texas. And Lee Harvey Oswald is arrested for the murder of Dallas policeman J.D. Tippit and arraigned for both of those murders. And on the 24th, I remember it so well, November 24th, nightclub owner Jack Ruby killed Lee Harvey Oswald. One of my true favorite people in doing these kinds of shows, lives in Texas herself, and her name is Katanna Zachry. Her voice is fabulous. I love her voice. And you think of where do we begin? And you mentioned the primary and how they got through West Virginia. And it was interesting in this book I finished. The United States of America only had 16 states that had primaries then.
True.
That the rest of it was all party bosses.
So those were important.
Oh. And what do you do with Joe Kennedy, the old man?
Hiding.
Oh, absolutely. Bad guy, really bad guy.
Well, and yet he was smart enough to know he had to be out of sight, but he couldn't. And they said even after he had his stroke, it took quite a while for him to realize he wasn't going to be able to pull the strings. He just couldn't help but manipulate. I mean, looking back, was it smart for him to insist that Bobby be made Attorney General? Perhaps, because if there had been any type of investigations, the Attorney General is supposed to be leading those. He could hide things if he needed to. Plus, I do think he thought Jack needs somebody who is totally on his side, who will agree and help be defending him regardless. But at the same time, I mean, that took lots of guts to just say, my young brother who's never practiced law is going to become the Attorney General of the United States.
When Harry Truman was questioned about Jack's Catholicism, and Harry Truman said, I'm not worried about the Pope. I'm worried about the Pop.
Yeah, and Harry Truman was smart.
Thank you. I think so too. I mean, very smart. And he
also knew inside politics. He knew how Joe Kennedy operated.
Oh, here's one. It's a Pete Boyles. The joke, and this is away from what you do, and it's factual, but this is hypothetical and in the ozone someplace. Joe Kennedy crossed the devil. He made a deal with the devil to become a wealthy, powerful character. And he double crosses the devil someplace. And that devil systematically takes his children, takes Joe, takes Jack, takes Bobby, almost takes Ted. Just down the list, the grandkids now are killed. It's disconnected, but I see myself looking at it and say, this is Joe Kennedy. Wow.
I've often wondered if he ever gave that a thought. And we know he did double cross people, whether you want to call them the devil or not. They were powerful people. Did he ever stop to think, now, did he bring Joe Sr.'s death on? No, or Kathleen's. No. But Jack's and Bobby's, surely he had to have stopped and thought, oh, this has to be partly my fault. Someone's getting back at me in the worst way that you can do that.
Because he had stroked, right?
Yes, in December of 61, I believe.
Did he know? I mean, people...
Well, one man that works for the Kennedys, in fact, I would love to talk to RFK Jr. or Joe the Third or Kathleen, any of the three older ones. And because Bobby used to bring lots of people around Hickory Hill, that if I described this person, I'd love to know, do you remember your dad ever bringing this man to your house and maybe y'all playing touch football together, just to see if some of his stories might have been true. But he said that Joe Kennedy is who hired him before Jack even got into politics. And his job was to smooth over anything that got in the way. And I mean, that could mean literally doing anything that got in the way.
Sure.
Legal or otherwise.
Yes.
And so with people like that working for you, he was the one that he did tell us, and then we talked for him half a day in his house. He said, yes, for a while, Joe Kennedy had a lot of brain matter that was still working. He just couldn't talk, and he couldn't write to express his ideas. And so I don't know whether Jack and Bobby pretended to take his advice when he would nod his head or whatever, or whether he really was trying to tell him, no, don't do this.
Yeah, I've read he blinked. He could blink his eyes is what I've read. Did he?
Yes, and nod, and he could yell. The one words that kept coming out were no, no, no.
Yes.
He could say no, oddly enough. But he thought that for a while they were still literally asking him questions and thinking that he understood enough that they were listening to what he tried to tell them.
As the story goes, he needed a fixer, and the fixer was Sinatra, but he did not want to get his boys involved, so Sinatra came to Hyannis, and that was the beginning of that the mob said, hey, wait a minute, in essence, we're right close to the break and bring you back on the other side. That Tony Arcardo and Sam Giancana and Carlos Marcello and Santos Traficante. And they look at the guy and say, well, he's our guy. We took care of him. We put him in. He owes us. He owes us. And Bobby Kennedy did what Bobby Kennedy did.
And he had to have done that with Jack's approval. Jack could have said, stop it. We can't afford to do this. And he didn't.
Could Jack have never not known? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I've considered that, but I just don't think so. I think it was more of the arrogance of now we're sitting in the seat of power and we hold all the power. And they didn't realize that wasn't true.
But at the same time, he's sharing girlfriends and, they're the other story too. I got 25 different stories to ask you about. Lyndon Johnson takes Bobby Kennedy deer hunting. It's just a great story. I read it for the second time, and the gun knocks Bobby Kennedy on his can.
And you don't do that.
No, you don't do that. You've read that story as well?
Yes, and that humiliated Bobby.
And he did it on purpose.
Oh, yeah. Lyndon was that mean. And
they called him Uncle Cornpone behind his back.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not even sure it's always behind his back.
Yeah. Hang on. Would you put her on hold, please? I adore this woman. This is a great morning to do it. It's Friday coming up. And the book is fabulous. I didn't put it down. The Last Honest Man, the CIA, the FBI, the Mafia, the Kennedys, and one senator's fight to save democracy. It's Frank Church. And then, of course, the Children's Hospital Colorado Toy Run is Sunday, December the 8th, 2024. And looking ahead at the weather, it's going to be 55 degrees, and that's great as well. So everybody hang on your hats. And also on our Saturday radio show, a new book is out, Elvis and the Colonel, a look inside the legendary partnership in show business. This guy shines the Colonel on. He doesn't portray the Colonel as other things that you and I have read or seen or listened to. So Elvis and the Colonel will do that on Saturday. Hang on for the best guests. Stay here, 710 KNUS.
Mostly sunny to partly sunny skies and fair weather today. Daytime high temperatures are going to be in the 40s, lows tonight teens and 20s, mid to upper 40s Saturday, 40s and 50s Sunday. So a dry stretch of weather today through the weekend here in Denver, and that trend continues. Likely going to be well into the 50s, lows 20s and dry Monday through Wednesday and next week. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Morning, everybody. Friday, Peter Boyle sitting in for the fellows, and then I'll be back here tomorrow morning at 9. It is Friday, November 29th, 2024. Good old 710 KNUS, Denver's talk station. 43, great shopping day. 47 Saturday and 48 degrees on Sunday. It was those many years ago that John Kennedy's murdered, assassinated hit in Dealey Plaza in Dallas. And it was one of the great mysteries of American history. And I have just been drawn to it, and I can't even really tell you why. But every time a new book appears, every time something happens, I go and find it and try and read it. I lucked out, 10 years ago. And the first time that I had a chance to meet Katanna, and she's fabulous. Katanna Zachry, she's in Texas. She's a historian coming up. A new book, I shouldn't say a new book, but a book on the market, The Last Honest Man, about, again, Frank Church and the CIA, the feds, the mafia, the Kennedys, and all the things. You know, one of the things that strikes me, if that was going on then, what the hell is going on now?
Sounds like history's trying to repeat itself, doesn't it?
Yes.
Which does, oddly enough, things like that do seem to run in patterns, particularly if you have people that are, standing up against maybe the establishment, doing things differently. That's not the way the government's supposed to work.
But this total lack of transparency, I was a young man when this happened, and we had a conversation the other morning with the guys who normally do this show and about the media, but people were sick. I mean, there was this moment that comes where rational media personnel are just sick and tired, fed up about being lied to. And then, of course, throw Vietnam into that, throw Watergate into it, Whitewater into it, the rest of it. And that's this witch's brew that we now have. Do you think that's fair?
Yes. In fact, Robert McNamara's son wrote a book called Our Fathers Lied to Us.
Yes.
And that's about as blunt as you can be, that, this wasn't just, we didn't understand, well, this is what they told us and we're just going to pass it on. These were out and out lies to the American people.
Neil Sheehan's book, Bright Shining Lie, the Bush-Cheney lies, the Johnson-Nixon lies, the ongoing lies. It's disgusting. And then we come back to something like this, and you wonder, Donald Trump has set a new deadline of October 26th, I think, and they're going to show these remaining documents. But Joe Biden also said was going to extend the deadline. None of them ever did it, did they? No,
not totally. And I think if we do get them, there's going to be lots and lots and lots of redactions. But, Peter, one thing they don't redact often is the subject matter. So you'll see the names, something about concerning so-and-so. So I don't know how you can defend and argue that redacting Lee Harvey Oswald's income tax forms, his mother's income tax forms, how on earth could those affect national security?
They can't.
But they could tell us where they got their money.
Thank you.
Follow the money.
Thank you. And now we discover the other new book on Oswald in Mexico. I'm not an expert, but certainly the American people didn't know that Oswald had gone into Mexico, had they? Or did they?
Well, and based on that photo that was handed to our government saying, here's a picture of Oswald, who wasn't Oswald, there's still a great deal of doubt as to whether the Oswald that we all saw paraded in front of the media in Dallas is the same Oswald that went to Mexico.
Who was Oswald? Who do you think he was?
I think he was a little man that got involved in something way over his head, because let's face it, I know there's lots and lots of doubt as to whether he would have had time to shoot Kennedy, whether he could have hit him that accurately, and get down the stairs in time to appear where Roy Truly and Marion Baker saw him. That's very, very iffy. But on top of that, there is the question of why would you have changed your clothes immediately? Having lived in the 60s, I do know men normally had work clothes and day clothes. Yeah. And so, yes, you might have changed out of your hot and sweaty clothes. But why would you have taken a pistol to a theater? Yeah. Now, there is another question. There have been people we have no proof he took a pistol. As far as we know, the Dallas police could have stuck a pistol into his hands, so he would have had fingerprints on, palm prints on it, and said he brought it. There are so many things. People who do research have found so many holes in the official story that it's hard to believe what it's called evidence.
Now, it drifts into obscurity. And yet it sets the stage for everything that is to come our way.
Yes. Yeah. Lying, hiding documents,
Yes.
shredding documents, whatever. It just seemed to fall into the pattern and keep going.
Two of the greatest exaggerators and liars, Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon, are there simply because of no, I shouldn't say simply because, but what happened to John Kennedy.
We always assumed Johnson was the main benefactor, but you're right. Down the line, Gerald Ford benefited from this. Nixon benefited from Kennedy being eliminated. It wasn't just Johnson.
Oh, no. What do you do with Hoover? What do you do with FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover?
Well, I know, according to Ben Bradley, Jack Kennedy had asked him, and I've forgotten another friend, if you could make two choices and people I should get rid of or move or something. One of the first one's name was J. Edgar Hoover, and the other was Allen Dulles. And then he said, we really thought he might. I think the other guy with him was Bill Walton, a friend and advisor.
Sure.
And he said, we really, we kind of assumed he might have listened to us. And yet then he said, literally heard him pick up the phone and have the operator call both Dulles and Hoover and brag on them and tell them how much he needed them to stay right where they were.
Yeah.
Well, my thinking is that was Papa Kennedy telling him, you don't get rid of these two men.
Or there's I'm sorry.
And Joe Kennedy may have later heard enough rumors to wonder if I didn't advise him wrongly in that direction too,
There's a story, there's two stories. One of them I just read that the president is going to go to California and they've arranged for him to stay with Frank Sinatra. And that Hoover goes in, and by this time Hoover knows about Judy Campbell, he knows about the relationships, the money, he knows everything. And he either tells Bobby or Jack, probably Bobby. And Bobby has to tell Jack, you can't go to Sinatra's, which makes the break. And that's why Sinatra ends up a Republican, putting on the party for Ronald Reagan years later.
Yes, yeah.
But I'm reading this, and it's about Sukarno, and they want to make a porno film. This is crazy. They want to make a porno film showing a guy dressed up like Sukarno, looking like Sukarno. And he's going to be having sex with a woman. And they're going to make this film. It's the CIA. And guess whose little studio, this knocked me out of my chair, whose little studio and who was playing out in this? You may know it.
No, I'm not familiar with this.
Bing Crosby.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's shocking.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Yes.
Bing Crosby and one of his aides, they weren't the lovers.
Yeah.
They had dressed up somebody looked like Sukarno, and apparently the film's someplace, and the CIA decided not to use it because they were trying to unseat Sukarno, and this was going to be a scandal in Indonesia. It was Bing Crosby. I'm thinking to myself, Peter, you are so naive about these people.
Yeah, it sounds like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, honest to God,
all American Bing Crosby.
Bing Crosby. Yeah.
That's White Christmas Bing Crosby.
And
it's just hard to believe.
And they're making a porno. I'll give you a call with I'm trying to think. I got 3 books going right now, and one of them is away from all of this, but it's about the Lindberghs and their connections into the Nazis.
Yes,
I'm an idiot. I really am. So you can't. Can they win? I mean, there's no way that they can win, and they bring and they've organized crime is mad at them. The Cubans are mad at them. The CIA is mad at them. Who else do you put on the list that list of suspects.
Well, Joe DiMaggio's mad at them.
Joe D.
Yeah. I mean, they did. Sarah and I have talked how many times about the later obituaries and the glowing reports after his death about how loved he was. Oh my gosh, he had more enemies than people can even imagine between the oil men. And you know, the thing is, we've always said whoever was behind this did not want to destroy the Democratic Party, because if all they could to get rid of Kennedy, all they had to do was let out any of these scandals and he'd have been gone. There may have been some things they could have said that would have had him impeached, but they didn't want to hurt the Democratic Party. So, you know, a public execution made a martyr out of him and swept Lyndon Johnson into the White House.
That's really what it was, wasn't it? A public execution.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a message to anybody that tried something else, you know, like this.
I'll tell you another quick, these very anecdotal stories. I had heart surgery, and my heart surgeon, Dr. Miller's a great guy. And so we had this one state, one book, and the governor at the time, and we put this out, and it turned out to be Pete Hamill's book, Snow in August. And it's, you know, it's the book itself is a wonderful book, but it's a set aside. So Governor Owens is the governor. I witnesses to this. Danny Hopkins, who is the press secretary for the governor at the time, my heart surgeon's wife, Pete Hamill, and a couple of state patrolmen who are the bodyguards for the governor. So we're at the Ellie Calkins ballroom, and we're sitting, you know, in the back getting ready to go on. And I'm a huge Pete Hamill fan. I just love Pete Hamill. And he dated Jackie Kennedy.
Yeah, I knew that.
Did I ever tell you this story where he?
No, he also dated Shirley MacLaine and lots of other people.
Oh, yeah. Listen, he was smooth. He was something.
Yeah.
Oh, I did. Ooh. And out of nowhere, wise guy, I said, Pete, who did Jackie Kennedy believe about who killed her husband? And he just looked at me and said, she believed in the conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
Jackie Kennedy believed in the conspiracy.
I think common sense would have told her and Bobby that this is a good story. In fact, you know, one of the oddity is that people heard when Bobby was told about Oswald, this was an odd thing. He always referred to him not as Lee Harvey, but as Harvey Oswald, which goes along with John Armstrong's book, Lee and Harvey, that there were at least two men at least using this identity, you know. And Bobby may very well have known one of them. Now, that would make you sick to your stomach if you thought, my Lord, I put this person in place and now he's getting blamed for killing my brother. But if anybody had access to information that the rest of the country didn't have, Jackie and Bobby did.
What role does we're coming up on time. I know you're almost past our agreed upon time. What role did the CIA play in this?
I think they had certain agents, at least. You can't blame the entire agency, but John McCone, we now know, hid information from the Warren Commission. So that doesn't make him completely innocent either. But I think he had a very important role in this, if nothing else, hiding information from the FBI and vice versa. It also, you don't hide information if it's not information you're embarrassed for the world to know about. So it can't be good information. So, yeah, I think they were important too, but I don't think they were the only group of people involved.
And one more thing, I talked to some, there are historians or investigators on all these different levels. And this fellow made a case to me, and he said, you know, that $14 rifle, the Mannlicher Carcano, I think is how it's pronounced. And he said they paid $14 for that. He said, you know, how the gun laws were in Texas at the time. He said he could have walked into any sporting goods store and bought a really high, a good shooting
Deer hunting rifle.
Thank you. Thank you.
But you wouldn't have had a receipt that led back to Oswald.
Yes.
They needed a receipt that led back to Oswald.
But he buys this for under $15, I think. He buys this rifle. And the guy said he could have bought a Weatherby on the corner. He could have bought a Remington. He could have bought
good one. Yeah. Well, I was doing a book signing in Fort Worth, Dallas, Fort Worth area. And a man came up to me and said, I'm related to Dial Ryder, who owned the gun shop where the scope was, they found the note that had the receipt that had Oswald's name on it for a scope, which the rifle didn't need a scope, supposedly. And I said, well, that's interesting. I said, do you have any family stories to tell? And he said, yeah. He said, Dial Ryder disappeared for about 2 weeks, and the family knew some men had come and gotten him. And when he came back, he was an entirely personality changed. Whatever they said is what, and he said, we never talked about those 2 weeks. But I don't think he was the only person that disappeared long enough for us to get our story straight here.
Sidebar. I'm like about a month ago, I read that Whitey Bulger thing and the MK Ultra, that they had that program.
Yeah.
And
that's scary.
Way scary. And what was the guy's, the rifleman, can't think of his name, it'll come to me. But the rifleman said, Whitey went away one way. And then he was the veteran of about, I don't know, I forget how many LSD trips, because you could get time off for taking acid. And they said, when Whitey came back, Steve Fleming, there it goes, just came to me. Steve Fleming, the rifleman. And he said they didn't know Whitey when he was crazier, worse, more violent. That's when he came back from Atlanta, I think. What we don't.
That's kind of like, Jack Ruby didn't start going crazy until Dr. Lewis Jolly West, who had worked with MK Ultra also, came and visited with him for about an hour privately. And after that, he started talking about the Jews being killed and, all of these nutty things that made him sound crazy as a loon. But that wasn't happening until Dr. West came and visited with him.
One more. One more. Sirhan.
Another iffy situation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even some of the Kennedys aren't sure that he should have been incarcerated all this time.
Gosh. I'll be thinking late tonight.
Well, and you don't want to get yourself in an unfortunate position where you might be the next Patsy for something,
Listen, believe me. Oh my. I mean, it is, and I mean, after this happened, and when the wheels, I think, well, not I think I know, Lyndon Johnson wanted this thing covered up as quickly as he could. So he gets that Warren Commission put together, and they're trying to calm everybody down, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's make this go away as fast as we can. And if we make a martyr out of him, that's great, because I'll get the Reed elected,
right?
With one of the biggest wins ever, and everybody benefits except Bobby, and we'll take care of that later on.
Right. I love you. I do.
Well, I love talking to you.
Yeah, I just enjoy. I mean, I'm writing things down while you talk. So.
Well, have you heard of the new book, A Woman I Know by Mary Haverstick?
No.
It is. The subtitle is Female Spies, Double Identities, and a New Story about the Kennedy Assassination. I mean, she did lots and lots of research about people that were used by the CIA as doubles, literally doubles. And you'd enjoy it. It's a good book.
The CIA is despicable. It just really is. And
I'm afraid, I don't know if they still are, but they were then.
Well, look at what they've just been through the last 4 years, and I've been trying to explain to people, their charter says they gather information abroad. They do not spy.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just laughed. Nixon turned the CIA loose on American people. He did.
Yeah.
And it was against the charter. And so when the CIA went to work on the American people, it was a total violation, but they apparently had been doing it all along anyhow. So what did you think?
Well, one of the documents that came out in the last dump they had was what people who'd done research knew, but it was evidence. It was between a military officer who was reaching out to the CIA saying, we need more soldiers, trained military to use as CIA agents. So, I mean, we've always suspected that's where the CIA was learning how to kill people so accurately.
Yeah.
Was in the military.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that makes you sick that you're taking patriotic soldiers and using them that capacity.
I got to get you on as fast as we can do it again. Merry Christmas. Thank you, Katanna. You always make these things work. Thank you.
Well, I always enjoy exchanging ideas, and next time maybe you'll have another book we can talk about.
I'm ready. Send it. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Be safe.
Sounds good. Merry
Goodbye.
Christmas.
Okay. You
Bye-bye.
too. As promised. Now, I think in The Last Honest Man is where I read about the Bing Crosby making the movie. I got to ask him. I'll really feel stupid if it isn't. But I think that's where I read it, that they used their bingo to make the film about Sukarno. All right, it is Friday morning, November 29, 2024, 710 KNUS, Denver's Talk Station. I'm Peter Boyles, back here tomorrow to do the Saturday show. And this book was just special as well, Elvis and the Colonel. And we'll do a couple hours with him, play some music, and have that time as well. Let's see, what else? When's the guy coming on The Last Honest Man? 8 o'clock. All right. So it's open lines, 303-696-1971. Lines are wide open, 303-696-1971.
At this hour, I'm Christina Ohio in Dallas, and here are your top stories. Tesla's 7-inch action figure of its upcoming humanoid robot went on sale and sold out in less than 24 hours. That's according to Teslarati, an outlet covering Musk, SpaceX, and Tesla News. You can only sign up to get notifications of when the $40 Tesla bot action figure is back in stock. Otherwise, you can buy it on eBay. Listings for there go as high as $1,300. The Tesla bot action figure has more than 40 individual parts and 20 points of articulation, a charging stand, and a cyber hammer. In a summer earnings call, Tesla said it expects to start limited production of its 5-foot 8-inch tall AI assistant robot early next year, just for company use. It expects a second version of Optimus will be available to the public in 2026. More shoppers are using buy now, pay later plans heading into the holiday season as the ability to spread out payments looks attractive at a time when Americans still feel the lingering effect of inflation and have already had record high credit card debt. Experts say the short-term loans can lead consumers to overextend themselves and warn that those who use credit cards for the service face higher interest expenses. The data firm Adobe Analytics predicts shoppers will spend 11.4% more this holiday season than it did a year ago. In Dallas, Christina Ohio, Salem News Channel.
Mostly sunny to partly sunny skies and fair weather today. Daytime high temperatures are going to be in the 40s, lows tonight teens and 20s, mid to upper 40s Saturday, 40s and 50s Sunday. So a dry stretch of weather today through the weekend here in Denver, and that trend continues. Likely going to be well into the 50s, lows 20s and dry Monday through Wednesday and next week. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Hi, morning, everybody. Lines are wide open. 303 696 1971. Good morning. It is Friday. Seems like a Monday, doesn't it? Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. November the 29th, 2024. 710 KNUS Weather Center weather. Cool and dry and 43. Tomorrow, Saturday, be back to work. 47. And then on Sunday, it'll be 48 degrees. Tomorrow on the radio show, the Saturday show that starts at 9 here on 710 KNUS. This book is really, really well done, but it's almost like it's a contradiction. The book is entitled Elvis and the Colonel, an insider's look at the most legendary partnership in show business. And in essence, what he is saying is we have all of this misunderstood, that he said, I'll just read the opening part. Colonel Tom Parker, often reviled in his time, guided Elvis's career from his star client's earliest days, and talked about how much money he made him and all the things he did for him. And if you're kind of an Elvis guy, you read that the Colonel's the bad guy. The Colonel's the bad guy. And this book is entitled Elvis and the Colonel. It's a pretty lengthy book. So he's with us tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning, right? When we come on, we'll do this guy on the show. 303-696-1971. Good morning. When you sit and listen to somebody like Katanna, or all of the books that are out there, and this new book coming up, we're going to be talking about at the top of the hour. It's about the CIA. And one of the, these promises that are made, and I don't know, what keeps people back from doing it. Somebody shows somebody something. But if you recall, many times running for office, some candidate will say, and I will show you the truth. When I get in there, I'll get all that paperwork and I'll show it to you, including Donald Trump. And we never saw it. I don't know why. You remember, and was, for whatever it's worth, and it's, I think, less significant, was Jimmy Carter and the UFOs. Remember, Jimmy claimed to have seen, I'm sure he did, saw a UFO. And he said, when I get in there, you guys are all going to see the UFO. I have all the, whatever it was that he was going to release. Same thing is true. And it was, in fact, it was Donald Trump was going to release it. And then he did not. And I don't know if they see something and go, oh my God, if I let this fly, what's going to happen? And I'm not talking about the UFO stuff. I'm talking about the promises on the assassinations. So I thought that was just really interesting stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just drawn to this, and because I think if you can explain this, think what else you can explain. And everything runs through Cuba. I truly believe that. All right, you want to go to work a little bit? Okay. All right, here we go. Line one is Doug. Doug, thanks for calling the radio show, and good morning.
Good morning, Pete, and thank you for all you continue to do
this is fun.
For Denver radio.
Oh, you're kind, but this is great stuff.
I am calling, I'm recalling, and I'm sure you recall this also, in this time in 1960, when Kennedy was picking his best and brightest cabinet, the one documented, of course, by David Halberstam's book of that name.
The best and the brightest.
Best and the brightest. And I recall Kennedy was getting kudos that, his cabinet had better picks than FDR's whiz kids type of thing. And, we all saw how they turned out, that it was, I think, a steady and hubris, among other things.
Well, that's really smart, Doug. It is, and it's true.
And I'm in recalling this stuff, I feel like we're reliving it right now. That, I'm just concerned that, Trump is getting all sorts of kudos for the most part for his cabinet picks. But are we being set up inadvertently again for these really bright people causing us issues, problems going forward.
One of the things, they were called the Buck a Year Man, was I think a lot of FDR stuff, and he brought the industrialists. They needed to put the country on a wartime footing, and so he would bring in the guys that understood steel mills and iron works and all that kind of stuff. When Jack Kennedy, they were the new frontiersmen. Remember that term?
Correct. No, absolutely.
It was the new frontier. And he was grabbing guys. And one of the things about, one of the most interesting characters, I think, right now with President Trump or Donald Trump is RFK Jr. I'm telling you. I mean,
and he's a link to that. The 1960 thing.
Well, but again, I had a conversation with some friends. I think, how old was he when his favorite uncle got killed?
I think he was 9.
And then how old was he when his father got killed? 14?
On that order, yes.
And by the way, I think the same people did both of them. I do.
I think we'll never know the answer in our lifetimes. It's going to keep trickling out.
And so then,
I don't know if you've heard of a guy named Jeffrey Shepard, no H, and he was a brand new Harvard lawyer. Ended up working in the Nixon White House, but on the White House side, not the committee to reelect the president side.
Creep.
So he's creep, absolutely. He was arm's length, but a witness to all the creep activities. And he thought that at the time, Nixon probably, should have been impeached, but he stuck with it for the past, 50 years. And he keeps digging up things that it turns out that what they did to Nixon is exactly what they tried to do to Trump. That they would.
But Nixon's dead bang caught. I mean, he.
Well, but this Jeffrey with a G, Shepard, just discovered some documentation that shows that they cherry picked the lines out of the tapes to frame him to a great extent. So this guy didn't have an axe to grind. He's very low key.
But I'm a kind of a Watergate geek, I'm sure he didn't know. I mean, in fairness to Nixon, he didn't know. Remember, there were all these leaks were taking place, and so somebody took and hand wrote on a piece of paper "plumbers" and put it in front. They were there to stop leaks, and so that was the plumbers. But he didn't know. Mitchell knew. Maybe Jeb Stuart Magruder.
Yeah, Nixon was cloistered.
He didn't know. I mean, but he did know the next day. And
agreed.
And I believe this. I believe that had he gone out in the Rose Garden, and the press hated him and he hated them, but had he said, last night the boys got off the leash, just something like that. And I know his buck stops here. I'm going to take care of it myself, but you all need to know what happened last night. And it stops and the buck stops on my desk. But he would have never resigned. And
again, there are ties back to the Kennedy administration because a lot of the lawyers that went after Nixon were all part of the Kennedy administration, and they hated his guts.
Hillary Clinton,
among others, but she was not part of the Kennedy administration.
No, but
she was fresh out of school. But
remember,
there's a long line.
Yeah, they kicked her off. Remember, they kicked her off. She was. But the thing about Nixon, and Nixon is a great sadness, but he also caused so many problems, and he got people killed for no reason. And it's just.
Oh, I agree. As a baby boomer, I'm still upset. Again, the best and the brightest got 50,000 of us lined up to get killed.
Yeah. Did you read? Did you ever read that? The Best and the Brightest.
Real time when it came out. And then I've read all the other Halberstam books that I could get my hands on. I was very interesting.
I met him, and He sat in the studio with us, and he wrote me a note, and I kept the note inside the book. And of course, he was killed in a traffic accident. But
yeah,
there was
had a young kid chauffeur.
Yeah, there was that one moment, and he talked about it. He was just a great. He really was
Just an interesting guy.
Oh, he was big and thin, but he said, so they're talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they some of these guys want to go, and they bring up this.
I think LeMay had his finger on the trigger.
Well, there's no question. LeMay, Maxwell Taylor, get on the list. They all wanted to go, and so this guy takes a, like they didn't have any PowerPoint or anything, but he's got an easel. And it's a map of the United States of America. He's a bird colonel. He's a Marine, and they're looking at it, mumbling. And then he flips over a silhouette, and it's Cuba. Okay, he's setting them up, and Cuba runs from like New York City to past Gary, Indiana.
Yeah,
and they don't know. None of these guys, these experts, know how big Cuba really is. And then he flips over another page, and the page is a little dot like about, Cleveland. And somebody said, well, what's that?
Or Pittsburgh.
Yeah, but wherever the dot was, and it's been so many years. But he said, so what's that? And the colonel said, that's Tarawa.
Yeah.
And
carnage.
Yeah.
Kennedy knew about that.
Oh, and the air goes out of the room. And they wanted, they legitimately wanted to start a war. And in some ways, and if you read all that stuff, you know that the Russians or Soviets, they kept the Cubans away. The guns were facing out, not in. And the guy they feared the most was Che Guevara. And they said, Guevara will punch the button. Well, right now.
Yeah, he's an instigator.
Right now, this idiot Biden's giving these ICBMs to God knows who.
Yeah.
But Doug, I love your phone call. What's that about?
Well, I think he's trying to go out big.
Yes.
Remember when Biden first got in, he had a bunch of Ivy League academics talk to him. And they said, in order to make an impression, you got to be big. And so that's why he pushed, these multi-trillion-dollar boondoggle bills that are causing the inflation now. And, I think he's still trying to think big. Obviously, the guy is demented. He's not thinking clearly. And even Teddy Kennedy thought that Biden was the dumbest guy in the U.S. Senate.
He did. He did.
That was the pot calling the kettle black as far as I was concerned.
But remember, I did the promo on it. His own party didn't want him. And yet he's got this free hand to give these guys missiles. I'm thinking,
but Cummins, I think would still support the guy. But I agree. The big, the people behind the Green Curtain certainly did not want him, especially after the Trump debate this spring.
Right. Last question. Who's the president of the United States as we speak?
Barry.
Barry's there. Never fear, Barry's here.
I think that's the
Doug.
truth of the matter.
Doug.
He never moved out of Washington.
Doug.
Built his house. He knew what he was doing. He's community organizing in D.C.
It is so scary right now. No, I don't even think I understand the big deal. I don't understand the depth of how nuts it is right now. I think.
Well, you and I both remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I grew up 20 miles from a SAC base.
Ooh.
So I knew we were goners. And
goners.
Well, that's the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
And I was on active duty in '73 when they raised our DEFCON level, and and I thought, again, I was at a place that was actively involved in resupplying the Israelis who were fighting the war, not one of their many wars, and I knew that was ground zero target also.
Well, in Pittsburgh, when Cuban Missile Crisis happened, my Uncle Gene, who was the great influence in my life, and I've met guys from other places, and everybody was the target. Like, my Uncle Gene would say, I'll tell you what, they're shooting Pittsburgh. I said, Pittsburgh. He said, yeah, iron, steel, coal. I'm thinking to myself, yeah. But then I thought later, how long does it take to take, this raw iron, and turn it into a nuke or something? But boy, at the time I'm going, hey, we got to find a bomb shelter someplace. We got to hide out. But how old were you? I was like 18, maybe 17 years old. God, scared to death.
I was born in 49.
I was born in 43.
Yeah.
You take care.
Young.
We got this.
Peter, thank you for everything.
Hang on for this next guy. The book is coming up, The Last Honest Man. Stay here. And tomorrow, we're going to do this new book in the market, Elvis and the Colonel, about Tom Parker and Elvis Presley. And it's really, really, really well put together. Good morning, everybody. Peter Boyles in for Jeff and Billy. It is a Friday, November the 29th, 2024, 710, KNUS, Denver's Talk Station. Thank you for being here. Tomorrow, as I said, we got the 9 o'clock show coming up again. Don't forget, save the date. Children's Hospital's Toy Run, Colorado Toy Run, and we're going to meet out at the park on Sunday, December the 8th, rain, snow or shine, but I looked ahead in the projected weather. It's going to be 55 degrees. Today, 43, cool and dry, but people can shop. 18, 47 Saturday, 20, and then 48. So I'm right, because I knew I had read that Crosby story. Lo and behold, I read it in this book. And I'm thinking, we're coming out of the box and we're going to talk about the CIA and the bingo trying to make a porno with Sukarno in it. And I get trapped in all the stuff I'm reading. I'm jumping ahead, jumping back, jumping ahead, jumping back. That's where it came from. Plus, he talks about everybody else as well. So what are we going to do here? Time to do a turnaround. We will come back with James Risen. Tomorrow is the Elvis show, Elvis and the Colonel. I don't know what else to tell you, except let's bust a cap. Let's get out of here. We'll come back with the man, the last honest man, 710 KNUS. little band from Texas, Dusty Hills, ZZ Top. Friday morning, November 29, almost feels like a Monday, 2024. It's good old 710 KNUS. We're Denver's talk station, 43, cool and dry, 18 tonight. Come back tomorrow and work, 47 degrees tomorrow. A new book on the market entitled Elvis and the Colonel. Really is very good, and they'll be with us. In the meantime, nothing's going to top this one. Please say good morning. It puts me over the top to have him on the show. I'm a fan. James Risen joins us, the last honest man. Thank you, sir, for doing this, and Merry Christmas and Happy Thanksgiving and everything that goes with it. Good morning.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you know what? I've been a fan for a while, and we had a woman on the show who's a historian out of Texas that writes about the Kennedys and writes about, the Lyndon Johnson and everything goes with us. And so I read your book about a month ago, and I get trapped up in all my reading, and I start talking about the the Bing Crosby story about making No, I'm serious. This is a heart attack. The Sukarno film. And I thought, and I went, wait a minute. That's Risen. That's in Risen's book. So as they used to say, without further ado, a good way to start the show. Bing Crosby makes a porno for the CIA.
Yeah. That was that. I did not have that on my bingo card when I first started working on that book.
The bingo.
But it was, it was amazing to really dig into the early history of the CIA and the crazy stuff that they did, especially in the 1950s, before there were any rules or regulations or anything. It's just, it's amazing. And most of it was really stupid and pointless and wasteful. And that's in this case, Bing Crosby, it's so hard to explain, where do you begin with this story? Bing Crosby, there was a guy who was a former FBI agent who had become a private detective in Los Angeles, and he was close to Howard Hughes. And he worked for Howard Hughes.
Robert Mayhew. Honest to God, James, I met him.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Really?
He had a book entitled Next, N-E-X-T, Next to Use. And he came out on the book.
Right. Yeah. His memoir about working for Howard Hughes. Yes, I read that. And he talked about how, in that book, I think he mentioned this story. Bing Crosby was very patriotic and wanted to do whatever he could for the United States. And Mayhew abused and exploited his patriotism by going to him on behalf of the CIA and say, we want to falsify a sex film involving the president of Indonesia, Sukarno, because we don't like Sukarno. So Bing Crosby arranged for a small studio in Los Angeles with some low-level actors to film a film that made it look like Sukarno was having sex with a Russian woman. And the CIA then put that out in the third world to try to discredit Sukarno and make it look like he was basically a puppet of the Russians. And it didn't really work.
No.
But it was just a crazy crap that the CIA was doing at that time.
My experience with Mayhew was really interesting.
It's interesting that you met him.
I did, yeah. He's a handsome guy. He's coiffed, as we say, and I look like a bum doing this show. But he it was at another radio station. I said, because I'm a geek, that's why I read you and everybody read all this stuff. So he came in, and 2 weeks before, do you ever read the Giancana's book, Double Cross?
I I read about Giancana. I don't think I read that one.
Well, the Giancanas is the nephew and I think his younger brother. They wrote a book.
Mhm.
They wrote a book called Double Cross, and they mention Mayhew in the book. So,
Right.
wise guy, I bring it up. I go, hey, can I ask you something? Yeah. the Mayhews, I mean, the Giancanas wrote about you. He lost. Do you do James or Jim? Which is best for you?
Either one's fine.
Okay, James. He went crackers. He was upset.
Yeah.
he didn't like that.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah, he tried to act like, throughout his life, Mayhew tried to act like he was just doing what the CIA wanted and, following orders. And it's fascinating that he was working for the CIA at the same time he was working for Howard Hughes. And so right after he got caught up in the church committee, or right about the same time, he got caught up in Watergate because he was also
yes, he did.
a bag man between Howard Hughes and Richard Nixon.
We were just talking about Nixon.
Yeah.
And they were muling money to Nixon.
Yeah. It's just phenomenal what all the dirty things he got involved with.
Nixon or Howard Hughes or all of them.
I meant Mayhew, but all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that time period, and I have this idea, but I won't do it. But if I had unlimited amount of time and I could go sit in the corner, a history book from the second that Jack Kennedy dies in Texas to the moment that Richard Nixon resigns. What a ride.
Yeah.
What a ride.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is a great time period, yeah. And that was basically the time period that the church committee was investigating.
Which is the reason I should go full circle and come back. You write principally, and I didn't know anything about Frank Church. I knew that there was a church committee. I knew that there was the Rockefeller committee. James Rison's here, and just won the Pulitzer, and he is like my idol. So I started reading this book and then I put it down. Talk about Church's life first. Well, let's do it. Let's do it the right way. So, if you would please.
Yeah, sure. Frank Church is a fascinating character who really hasn't gotten enough attention. He played a huge role in the 20th century, and very few people remember him. He was a senator from Idaho, and he was a Democrat. He was a liberal Democrat. He's the last Democrat ever elected to the Senate from Idaho. Even today, he was born in Boise in the 1920s, and was really an amazingly smart kid. He was always considered the smartest kid in class from the first days, and he was in school. When he was 14, he wrote a letter to the editor of the Boise newspaper that was so good that they put it on the front page of the paper. It was a defense of William Borah, who was a senator from Idaho at the time, who was an isolationist. And no one could believe that this very articulate letter had been written by a kid in junior high school. And then he went on to win the national oratory contest put on by the American Legion, and that got him a scholarship to Stanford. And then in World War II, he became a Army intelligence officer in China, and that experience really was the first experience he had that really began to alter his outlook on the world. He realized that the Chinese nationalist government that the U.S. was supporting in World War II was deeply corrupt and incompetent, and didn't really deserve American support. And that really was the first thing that began to change his views on American foreign policy. And he began to realize with the use of the atomic bomb also convinced him that the United States was becoming an empire, a militaristic empire. And then when he ran for the the Senate from Idaho when he was elected when he was only 32 in 1956. He became at first more of a conventional Democrat and mainstream because, at that time, everyone was worried about the Soviets. But as soon as the Vietnam War began, he went to Vietnam and he looked around and realized this was just like his experience in China. And he was one of the very first politicians in Washington to turn against the war in Vietnam, much earlier than anyone else. And his opposition to the war really radicalized him and made him realize that the United States, that Vietnam was a symptom of a larger problem. The United States was becoming a militaristic empire, and that its foreign policy had to be reined in. And ultimately, in 1975, it was that feeling that the United States was becoming an empire that made him want to run what became known to history as the Church Committee, the first committee ever to investigate the CIA and the FBI and the NSA and the role of the intelligence community in American foreign policy. And it set the stage for congressional oversight of the intelligence community.
Her guest is, the book is special. James Risen, it's Risen. The book is The Last Honest Man, The Life and Times. And Frank Church dies young. Was he 56, I think? I remember when he passed.
59.
59.
He died of cancer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right after he was he was in the Senate from 1956 to 1980, or 57 to 81, and he from Idaho, and he continued to get elected in a very conservative state as a liberal Democrat, mainly because he was very honest with the voters. He would tell them exactly what he thought about everything, and he would travel around Idaho, county by county, and just set up shop at county courthouses and let people ask him any question they wanted. And that really paid off during the Vietnam War in the 1960s, when he was deeply opposed to the war, and he had to run for re-election in 1968, which was a very chaotic year. And he won easily because he convinced everyone in Idaho that he was telling the truth about, he was being honest, and he had an honest opinion about the war. And people respected that about him.
You have this moment when he comes into the Senate and he's a freshman, and he gets the grip put on him. And I've told half a dozen people that story. If you would, James, tell that story about who gripped him.
Yeah. Well, first he ran first. His first campaign, I think, was fascinating. Just to step back one step, was he ran against a guy named Herman Welker, who was an incumbent Republican, and he was Joseph McCarthy's closest ally in the Senate at the time. And he was so close to McCarthy that Welker was nicknamed Little Joe from Idaho.
Yeah.
And he was, when Church ran against him, there was all kinds of dirt that could be used against Welker. And his staff and some allies put together a pamphlet listing all that dirt. And as soon as Church saw it, he was horrified, and he ordered all of the pamphlets to be burned in a bonfire behind his office, and said, "I never want to win by mudslinging. I'm only going to win by on the issues." And he beat Welker and went on to, in the Senate, in his first vote, right as soon as he was sworn in, Lyndon Johnson was then a senator from Texas, and he was the Senate Majority Leader, the Democratic Senate Majority Leader. And as soon as Church was sworn into the Senate and he was walking back to his seat, Johnson got up and grabbed him and said, I need to talk to you about this first vote we're going to have.
Oof.
And it was a procedural vote about that it was part of a large fight that was starting over civil rights legislation. And it was just a procedural vote about, cloture and the filibuster and stuff like that. And Church, he told Church, if you've got to get along to, basically go along to get along, and you've got to cooperate with me if you want anything to get done. That was the message, basically. And Church voted against him on this procedural motion without first telling him that he was going to vote against him. And Johnson didn't talk to him for 6 months.
Yeah.
And that was the way that Johnson dealt with opposition on. He froze him out.
The book is The Last Honest Man. James Risen is our guest. I've read all the Carnot stuff, Lone Star Rising, Master of the Senate. I've read so much about Johnson. What do you do? What do you do with Lyndon Johnson?
You mean, what do I think of him?
Yeah.
I think he was a really fascinating character, very complicated. And I think he was he was a tragic figure, because I think ultimately his plan for the Great Society and for civil rights was badly needed by the country, but it was crippled by Vietnam.
He certainly, he wasn't. They paint the Kennedys as the civil rights advocates, but it was Johnson, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Kennedy had proposed civil rights legislation, but really hadn't pushed it. When Kennedy was assassinated, Johnson took it up as a moral cause in the name of the martyred president. But I think you could argue that Kennedy probably never would have gotten it through the Senate.
His father warned him. We're talking about Joe Kennedy last hour, but Joe Kennedy wanted him to stay as far away from all of this as he could.
Yeah. I think that's probably right.
Can I bounce?
And I think that. Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize. Can I bounce some names off you and just have you react to them? And because Sam Giancana.
Well, Giancana was the mob boss of Chicago, who was, a typical mobster, but who really, his fatal mistake was he tried to get too much attention. He was too flamboyant and too public about what he was doing in the late 50s and early 60s. And as a result, the FBI began to make him the focus of their investigations. And then at the very same time, the CIA began to work with him to kill Fidel Castro. And so at the same time that the FBI was trying to put him in jail, the CIA was working with him to kill Castro.
Yeah.
And those two things were going on at the same time. And when J. Edgar Hoover found out that the CIA and the Kennedy administration were secretly working with Giancana and other mobsters to kill Castro, it led to really the central story of my book and the Church Committee. Their main investigation really began to focus on why the CIA was working with the mafia to kill foreign leaders.
But there was a book when I was in school millions of years ago, a book entitled The Secret Surrender. And it was about Allen Dulles and an SS general by the name of Wolf. And Allen Dulles goes, and the deal was nobody surrenders until they surrender to all of us, meaning Soviets and British. And Allen Dulles, how significant is Allen Dulles in creating the company, the CIA?
Oh, he's incredibly
Yeah,
important.
yeah.
Well, what happened is, if you look back at the creation of the CIA was, in World War II, the U.S. had an intelligence service called the OSS, which was basically a bunch of amateurs and trying to go around the world to do sabotage and paramilitary activities, and it really was not very effective. And after the war, there was a push to create a permanent intelligence agency.
Because of KGB?
Well, it was really, it led back to Pearl Harbor and the sense that the United States had been surprised by the Japanese attack, and that the U.S. needed a permanent system to warning of what other countries were doing. The problem was that in the CIA was created in the legislation known as the National Security Act of 1947. And that law also created the Air Force, and it created the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it had a lot of moving parts in it that were larger issues than just the CIA. And one of the problems with that legislation is it had a very vague definition of what the CIA was supposed to do and what it could do and couldn't do. The legislative charter for the CIA still, even today, is very vague on on the limits of what it's supposed to do.
If you don't mind.
And as a result, what happened under Harry Truman, who was president at the time, he only wanted basically an intelligence service that collected, that was a central place where all intelligence reports could go, and you would have some analysts write reports about what all that meant. He wanted a very modest analytical agency that could, write independent reports about what was going on around the world. But when Eisenhower came into the presidency in 1952, he had this very different view of having been a general. He didn't want a military confrontation with the Soviets. He didn't want another war with the Soviet Union, and the best way he thought to deal with the Soviets was through covert action and using the intelligence community. And so he brought in Allen Dulles as the director of the CIA, and basically gave him a mandate to turn the CIA into a covert action weapon for the president. And it was really Allen Dulles and Dwight Eisenhower who changed the CIA into the more fearsome weapon of presidents that we have known ever since.
And again, with you sitting here, the charter, or my reading suggests they were not supposed to be, or not allowed to come internally into the country. That was the job of the FBI, and their job is all of that true?
Yeah, that's basically the limit. The problem was that the charter was vague. Yeah. There are limits on what they can do inside the United States, but they also have the ability to recruit people inside the United States. Yeah. So the limits were vague, and throughout its history, the CIA has pushed those limits. The main limit that was never really put in place, that should have been put in place, was to limit it to a role of intelligence analysis rather than covert action. And the problem was that it became very easy for Eisenhower and Dulles to change it into something that Truman did not anticipate.
Did Richard Nixon use the CIA during his I don't want to say witch hunting, but did he use the CIA as he used the FBI, as he used the plumbers?
Well, that was a question that came up in Watergate.
Right.
And there was a lot of controversy around that point, and that was really led to the creation of the Church Committee.
Yes, that's right.
When the Watergate hearings began, and when Watergate investigation began, there were signs of connections to the CIA. Many of the people arrested in the Watergate break-in had worked for the CIA.
Yep.
Either as employees or contract employees. You know, there were a lot of Cuban exiles.
Yep.
Who had worked for the CIA in the Bay of Pigs
Yes.
who were involved. And there were CIA case officers, former case officers.
Felix Rodriguez. Felix Rodriguez.
Yeah, and then and so the sense that the CIA was somehow involved was kind of right at the forefront of the initial investigation. And Richard Helms, who was the CIA director, came out and denied any direct involvement.
Yeah.
But then, after Helms left, there was more evidence that that there was at least logistical support from the CIA to the plumbers, and particularly in a very an incident that a lot of people don't remember, which was that the plumbers really started after the Pentagon Papers leak.
That's right.
To the New York Times in 1971. And Daniel Ellsberg, who
I met,
analyst at the RAND.
I met Ellsberg too. Ellsberg. Yeah, Neil Sheehan. I met Ellsberg and.
Yeah. Anyway, so he is the person who had leaked it.
Yeah.
To the New York Times, and the Nixon administration created the plumbers at first to go after Ellsberg, even before Watergate.
Didn't they go for a shrink first?
They burgled his psychiatrist's office to get his psychiatrist records, and the CIA had provided logistical support to that break-in, and that led to the new CIA director at the time in 1973, after this started to come out publicly, James Schlesinger, who had replaced Helms, he was very furious that it was starting to come out that there was more CIA involvement in Watergate than had come out before. And so he ordered secretly within the CIA, he told everyone, if there is any secret that of a illegal activity or even questionable activity that you know about from the past, I want all of that information to be sent to me. So he ordered everyone in the CIA to tell him about every possible questionable activity that they had ever done. And he put it all together in what became known as the Crown Jewels report.
Yep.
And that lay secret inside the CIA for another year or two until it got to the Church Committee.
Let me do this.
And that became a roadmap for an investigation of the CIA.
Well, I got them leaning. I have a Gordon Liddy story when Liddy came out of the penitentiary. Yeah. Can I do a couple quick things and we'll come back? Hang on, please.
Yeah, sure.
This is a remarkable guest, a remarkable book. The book is The Last Honest Man, James Resin. He is present at the creation. We come right back.
At this hour, I'm Christina Aguayo in Dallas, and here are your top stories. Olalai on the island of Sardinia has been trying to persuade outsiders to move there after decades of depopulation. Now it has launched a website aimed at Americans upset over the results of the presidential election. While anyone can apply, U.S. citizens will have favor over other potential applicants. The village is offering free temporary homes to digital nomads, €1 homes in need of renovations, and ready-to-occupy homes for about $105,000. The village's mayor has set up a team to help guide interested buyers through the purchasing process. Now that Thanksgiving is done and dusted, the holiday shopping season is officially in full swing. Tony Waterman has a preview on what is expected to be a record-selling sales season. Americans are expected to spend record amounts on Black Friday through Cyber Monday, averaging about $650, which is a 15% increase over last year. That is according to Deloitte.
The buy now, pay later model is also expected to hit a record this holiday season. It's really a popular option for mobile shopping, and more online shoppers are using generative AI to help find the best deals, specific products, and recommendations. In Austin, Tony Waterman, Salem News Channel.
In Dallas, Christina Weil, Salem News Channel.
Mostly sunny to partly sunny skies and fair weather today. Daytime high temperatures are going to be in the 40s, lows tonight teens and 20s, mid to upper 40s Saturday, 40s and 50s Sunday. So a dry stretch of weather today through the weekend here in Denver, and that trend continues. Likely going to be well into the 50s, lows 20s, and dry Monday through Wednesday and next week. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Friday, everybody. Good morning, November 29, 2024. Good old 710 KNUS. Just a wonderful guest. 43 the high today, 47 tomorrow. His name is James Risen, and the book we're talking about this morning is The Last Honest Man, about Frank Church. Before I tell you, when I read you, it's like you get to do what I want to do. You get to meet. And I think because on being on this side of the microphone, I mean, these guys write books, and I go out of my way to go and get them, to bring them into the studio to talk to them. I mean, I'm not on anywhere near your level, but I'm so fascinated, particularly by that period. At the end of the Second World War, to as we speak, I would expect.
Yeah. I mean, I think the post-war era is fascinating because the United States was really transformed from being a small, kind of isolated country into a superpower.
And what a mistake.
Yeah.
What a mistake. So Liddy comes out of jail, and he'd been in Lewisburg, and he'd been with Hoffa and Tony Provenzano, and been really up on the, as they say, on the tier. And he had written a novel before he wrote the one when he was burning his hand with the candle. So nobody wanted, nobody wanted to talk to him. And I said, "Are you kidding me? I want to meet Gordon Liddy." And if we were just sitting together, I would tell you a couple of Liddy stories that he told me off air, but about what he thought happened. So he's not allowed to have guns anymore. He took away because he's a felon, and he can't have guns. And I said, "So you not allowed to have guns?" And he said, "But Mrs. Liddy has 34."
Okay.
But he just went on and on. He knew, he knew everybody, and there was part of me that, greater part of me, I admired him. He never talked. He went to DC, and then what's that place they went to in Florida, James? They went. It was.
What do you mean?
Well, he and the Cubans went there, and they did their time there.
Oh, the prison. You mean
yes,
the prison?
Yeah.
Eglin. I think it was at Eglin Air Force.
I think you know what? You're right. You're right. And I talked once to Erickman and once to Halderman, and there's a word that describes both of them. And they're so I don't know when it was said and done.
Mm-hmm.
And it was said and done. Did the era end with Nixon?
You mean that whole time period?
Yes.
No, I mean obviously I think Nixon is a fascinating character because he was so complicated, and he on the one hand he had the one thing that he cared about was American foreign policy, and he had a vision for a foreign policy based on realism, kind of the old Metternich approach to nation building and balance of power. And that's why he had Kissinger. Kissinger was the archetype of kind of amoral foreign policy in which the United States becomes more and more of a superpower. And really that approach to foreign policy continued long after Nixon left. And it's only occasionally do presidents kind of rebel against it. Like Jimmy Carter tried to be different, and he tried to have a foreign policy based on morals and human rights, and he got smacked down by the establishment for that.
Yes, he did.
But ever since, most presidents have gone along with a foreign policy based much more on what Kissinger called realism.
I met Jimmy Carter twice. He was in the studio with us, and that when he pulled from the Olympics, and he set everybody off by doing that. And what my friends call, what did they call it? The Jimmy Carter Desert Classic. when he
right.
attempted to make the rescue, that kind of stuff. And but you couldn't have found a better guy. I mean, he was just this really, really, really cordial, polite Southern guy. But
yeah, and I think he tried to rebel against this kind of mainstream view of foreign policy that the United States has to always, be an aggressor around the world.
I agree.
And he didn't want to do that.
If I could ask you, in that time period, beginning with Jack Kennedy, who's your who's your pick? Who's your favorite out of all of those men?
I don't really have a favorite. I mean, one of the things about being a reporter, I've been a reporter all my life, is that, and I've been in Washington for a long time, and you get to see, as a reporter, you see the truth about every president.
Oh yeah.
And I've often joked that the more I see of each president as a reporter, the less I like them. So I think that's true for just about every one of them.
Freud said familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah,
I did.
Yeah.
And I'm like you, you meet these guys. Are there people you wish you'd have never met? Here, I'm just taking you off into Wonderland here, but are there people you wish you'd have never met?
I don't know. No, not really. I mean, I've enjoyed the thing about being, you probably know, I've been a reporter for newspapers, as well as writing books. And it's been fascinating to, meet and travel the world and meet so many people. I've met a lot of bad people.
Yes.
But they are, they're fascinating also. So, in different parts of the world, and a lot of the bad people I've met are in Washington. So
you wrote a book on the history of the CIA and the Bush administration. How the hell did Bush walk into Iraq?
I wish if I could tell you that, I would be a rich man.
Yeah.
I think you have to psychoanalyze George Bush to understand that, because it made no sense. And the country, the entire United States, got mesmerized. And it really was frightening to see how easily manipulated the American people were by the idea that we had to invade Iraq. It really was about Bush's father and his relationship.
I've heard that theory. I've heard that theory that he showing his old man that he could do it.
Yeah, plus the neocons around him who had been out of power in the 1990s while they were in exile in the 1990s, they all just kept talking about how we have to go back after Iraq. And he brought all of those people back into power.
Yes, he did.
And they went off, and as soon as 9/11 happened, the first thing they thought of was, this allows us to invade Iraq.
That story is true. I mean, or at least I've read it half a dozen, that Cheney's starting to look at pipelines. The buildings,
Right.
The buildings are still smoldering, and I guess that's a wide open-ended description. But I'm told that in essence it happened.
Well, Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz in the Pentagon were pushing for war with Iraq immediately after 9/11.
But Saddam had nothing to do with it.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I did as a reporter, if you remember, there was in the months after 9/11, and for about a year, there was this argument from the Bush administration that there was a meeting between Iraqi intelligence agents and an Al-Qaeda operative in Prague, Czechoslovakia. And so I had a bunch of sources in the intelligence community who told me, oh, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
And here are the people you should go meet in the Czech government. in the Czech intelligence service who know the truth.
Hmm.
So I went to Prague, and I forget exactly when, it was about a year after 9/11. And I talked to the people in the Czech intelligence service and the ministry officials, and they were all laughing privately at the United States for believing this crap. And so I wrote a story saying this is all nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And I got incredible attacks from the Bush administration and for writing the truth about that. And nobody wanted to hear the truth.
No.
You know?
What was that guy, Curveball? The guy they were running Curveball in on everybody.
Yeah. And the Republicans in Congress refused to listen to anybody attacking Bush.
Oh,
it was the solid. All the Republicans who later turned against the war in Iraq, they're all full of crap. At that time they wouldn't do anything to stop Bush.
This is my question I can't answer. I'm going to ask it, and then if I could pause and you come back and talk to it. Why was Saddam not brought home and put on trial? Why was Osama not brought home, put on trial? And why was Che Guevara not brought home and put on trial? Where was no, it's a serious question. And I think I got my own answer, I think, but it isn't probably the right one. But here they got them. You know, that's Hermann Goering.
Yeah, well, this is one of the central dilemmas of American foreign policy, which is
answer. I got a break
around the world.
Let me, James, hang on. Do a quick turnaround and come back with that one. Wrap it up. There we go. Hit the wall. Here we go. Coming up on Time Quick, it's a Friday morning, just an incredible guest. James Risen's with us, the last honest man. A question that's been driving me is, why did we kill Saddam Hussein? Why did we kill, actually they killed Che Guevara, Saddam, and Osama, not bring them back and put them on trial? James?
Well, you've hit on one of the central dilemmas of American foreign policy in the post-war world, which is that we feel like we have impunity around the world to take actions that other countries would consider immoral or warlike, and we don't want to get them involved in the U.S. legal system. And so we have what we call extrajudicial operations around the world, where we do things around the world that don't abide by American law, are not subject to the U.S. legal system. And they know that if they bring back someone to the United States, that they then have to stand trial. That's why they created the Guantanamo prison, was to keep all of the Al-Qaeda suspects out of the U.S. legal system. The problem then becomes, what is the legal system that you're going to use at Guantanamo? And nobody has an answer for that. That's why those people have been in limbo for 25 years now. And so it's a central problem the United States has never wanted to resolve. So that we allow people, or we give mandates to agencies like the CIA or the military to conduct airstrikes or predator drone strikes against people we claim are terrorists with no legal, with very little legal review.
I always wondered I wonder what Saddam would really say on trial.
Saddam was subject to a trial in Iraq. And it was a kangaroo court
they hung
put on by the government that we had installed.
That's right.
He was not, there's no, there would have been some laws in the United States that he could have been tried on, but probably nothing that would have led to the death penalty. And so we wanted the Iraqis to deal with him and get rid of him. And they did.
Why did they cut their hands off? Why they cut Che Guevara's hands off and then they cut off Osama's hands? Why did they do that?
I don't know that. I've never heard that. I don't know that they did that.
Yeah, they did. And I think I was wondering why they did that.
I'm not familiar with that.
You're the best guest in about the last 400 years. I'd love to have you back. We do a Saturday show, and I'd love to have you back. And if you ever get within 100 miles, I'll show up and have lunch. But
okay, great.
You're wonderful. You really are just a tremendous guest. I thank you. I thank you for the book, but I thank you for the time too.
Well, thanks for having me.
You're the man. Merry Christmas. Thanks, James.
Okay, you too. Take care.
Bye. All right. Now, I'm going to get a quick drop from Robbie Farrow about the toy run. Then we'll go to open lines. People have been chomping for open lines since this puppy started at 6 o'clock. Back here tomorrow at 9, the book Elvis and the Colonel. Hold on your hats. We're right back. I don't know if that's I fought the law and the law won or not. Is it? Oh, okay. Old ears hear different music. Good morning. Final hour, and it's open lines. It's a Friday, November 29th, 2024. Good old 710 KNUS. Beautiful weather. Cloudy, cold, 43. Tomorrow, much the same in 47. And Sunday, 48 degrees. 303-696-1971. I think it's been a tremendous show. I really do. I think we had some very smart people on and talking about something I know that's troubled certainly me since that day in the fall of 63 and Jack Kennedy and is killed by Lee Harvey Oswald, we're led to believe, and the assassination, November 22, 1963. It's been a long time. And all the things that happened. And but the two people we had for guests today were just beyond. James Risen, I thought, was just special. And I always loved, and again, when she comes on the radio show, we talk, and Katanna comes on and talks. And if all of that was going on then, so I asking myself this last night when I was, acing the show together, what the hell is going on now? If that was going on then, what the hell do you think is going on now? And this, the Biden and the missile thing is just, we talked about it last Saturday. This is a guy whose own party didn't want him. And yet he's handing missiles out and they're being shot at Putin. I don't know. I'm just not there. So it is what it is. Tomorrow on the radio show, come back for the Saturday show. And it's a remarkable book, lengthy, called Elvis and the Colonel. And it's about the legendary partnership of Colonel Tom Parker and, of course, the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley. All right, Jacqueline, you're on the show. It is a Friday morning. Welcome. Thank you.
Well, I love you dearly. Pete, I've got to say this. I was in the third grade when John F. Kennedy died, and they came in. The teacher was crying. They took us out of school. We went home. And I remember that very, very well. I can tell you now exactly what I was doing the day John F. Kennedy died. I wouldn't with a lot of other things in history, but that stuck with me very well. And I've had two husbands that went to Vietnam. Both of them come back, and I don't know. What I'm saying is this now. My father never believed, and I still don't now today believe, that John F. Kennedy was just assassinated by somebody off of the knoll. And I think you're right. I think you're right about having all these people on here. And the old gal from Texas, I love her.
Oh.
She's a smart cookie.
She is. So then now what?
Well, I don't know. Are we seeing this again? The United States of America has been bought by other countries. And, where does all the Rothschilds figure into all this, Pete? My dad says they were dirty people from the beginning. They're Jewish billion trillionaires.
But
where do they fit in all this?
Why bring up Jewish?
Because that's who they are.
Oh, no, I understand. But when you say rotten, it's
Rothschilds.
That's not their real name.
Okay, what is the real name, Pete?
Well, the Rothschild means red shield, and they would, when the laws, the anti-Jewish laws that existed in places like France and Spain, and they were bankers. So over their doors, they would have a red shield made out of wood or made out of metal and painted red. And so you knew that was where you could go and you could do banking. And touching money was seemingly it was unclean for the.
It was unclean. It was a sin. Now, where are these people now? There's nothing. They're ghosts. They don't live.
The Rothschilds are very wealthy people live in Europe. We have the Mellons, and we have the Schaafs, and we have the Rockefellers. Would you call them the same things?
Yeah, pretty much. You know, I understand that the United States of America came in here. They came in ships through Plymouth Rock, through Jamestown, and everything else. But you know what? Our banking, our money, and you don't even own anything in this country. Who owns it? I have a small little house here in Nebraska. Do I own this house? No, I don't, Pete. I don't own this house. So who owns all that stuff? I think somebody ought to be
we have a system here in this country. When my father was a young man, a working man could not buy his own home. Working man. Now, when they establish a system of mortgages, and of course it's on the money, but where a working man could buy his own home. My dad bought his first house when I was in the 6th grade.
I remember all that stuff, Pete.
But think about stop. A working man could never afford to buy a house because you had to buy it. And so when the system arrives where you can monthly pay and own your home, and I realize that, that interest rates are playing out in all of this, but this is the same thing where a working man can form a union, and he can have an Evinrude outdoor boat. He could send his children to school, to college. Yes. I mean, they're not. I mean, so that kind of thing. And you can thank FDR for that, and you can thank a lot of people for that. But the allowance where a working man could move forward and could buy, he bought a house on time. A lot of those guys were World War II guys, but they made the union. They did all of those things that they were required to do, and the banks were who they were. And the one thing that is to put in the back of your head is Thomas Jefferson leaves us with 3 important warnings. Number 1 is a standing army, and we have a standing army today. Jefferson feared a standing army pretty much because in Europe, he watched what a standing army could do. Number 2, he warned about a national church. He watched the Orthodox Church in Russia. He watched the Roman Catholic Church in France and Italy. He watched the Church of England. He said no national church. The next thing that he warned against, and this is the one that is about our First Amendment rights. But those were Jefferson's warnings, and they're important now and they're important then. I appreciate your call. We go to Ralph in the Springs. Ralph, hey man, good morning. You're on the radio show.
Good morning. I hope this connection is good.
It is.
Okay, in talking about extrajudicial actions, what people tend to forget is one of the reasons you do it is that your intelligence isn't really that good. There was no attack on U.S. destroyers on August 4 that started the Tonkin Gulf War going.
The Maddox and the Turner Joy.
Precisely. Yeah. However, our intelligence was, well, we got to do something here. So they did. And we now have a nice memorial in Washington.
Well, Lyndon Johnson wanted that attack to be real.
Sure. Well, but the thing is, 2 weeks after the attack, Johnson said, well, what it was just a couple of dumb sailors shooting at flying fish.
Well, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution was passed already.
Oh, absolutely. It was after it was passed. Now take another look. Saddam's weapons of mass destruction.
Didn't exist.
Right. Take a look at another act. Abdul Amaraman al-Awlaki. His dad was a terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
They assassinated his dad with a drone strike. And they also assassinated him when he was, having dinner with some of his friends in, I think it was Iraq, but I could be wrong there. Anyway, the short of it is... let me add one. Don't forget the Maine. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But, I mean, the thing is, we have a history of making mistakes and killing people, killing lots of people. One of the reasons that the United States and England developed the legal system of trial by jury was because you didn't want the king's justice. The king's justice, if I may quote Louis the 14th, I think, the law is what I say it is. Well, we say we don't do that here in the States, okay, but we do it overseas. And the people that we do it in front of, foreigners, not American citizens, know very well that U.S. law is not really the, how shall I say, what the United States is all about. We're about power.
Well, the downfall of this country, and we'll see what the next 100 days brings and what the next 4 years bring. It is so repetitive to why empires fail. We are the same as the British Empire, the same. I mean, it's on a list of things. History has this remarkable ability to predict outcomes. It's like, last night I'm finishing up this Last Honest Man, and it's almost, that's why I really wanted to talk to this guy, and because he's got it, he's got it, but we don't use the multinational corporation and the American military go hand in glove. When you've been abroad, I know you have, but you go places you're not liked, and you have to ask yourself, why don't they like you? And I don't mean you have to go through the world kissing derrieres, but there's something coming, and I'll see what, let's see what Donald Trump can do. This ceasefire that Netanyahu, jumps up as a ceasefire. Ralph, how long do you think that ceasefire holds?
Until one side or the other decides it's in a position to get a better deal by going to war.
When Trump gets sworn in, and it has nothing to do with Trump, they're going to cut loose again. It's like, stay out, get away from these guys, get as far away from them as you can. When his own party, I'll give you the last comment, when his own party says he's not capable of running for re-election, but he is capable for giving out missiles.
Yes, with nuclear warheads, but just remember, Peter, that the reason behind the Boston Tea Party was the British East India Company was going bankrupt. And it was having the tea sold in the U.S. was a means of bailing them out.
Huh? No, I know.
Last comment.
Yeah, go ahead. Take it. Last comment. Go ahead.
No. That's it, Peter. I mean, the fundamentals are what ran the British Empire, what ran the French Empire, what ran, you name it, probably the Roman Empire, was basically in order to make more money for its richest people.
Sure.
They had to have overseas expansion. They had to have colonies. Hence the word empire.
Oh, yeah. or Imperial. But
Right.
I don't know. You're on the money. Thanks, pal.
Have
All
a
right. Thank you. Let's do that right, Peter. 303-696-1971. Have you find Robbie yet? Okay. We got to find Robbie Farrow to talk about. Well, why don't I talk about it, and then we'll pause for the cause. The 39th annual Children's Hospital Toy Run is Sunday, December the 8th. I looked as far as they can projecting weather, 55 degrees, so it's going to be nice and warm. The toy run is on, they say rain, snow, or shine. I've done all three, but it's really nice when it's nice. And you get an unwrapped toy, and you can go get some breakfast and then ride out. And the park is the part of Aurora. Then from there we ride to Children's Hospital, dump the stuff off, and Mile High throws a blast after that. Aurora Sports Park, 19300 East Colfax Avenue. And so you go there and you line up, and it'll do your, as I just talked to a friend of mine, do your Black Irish heart some good. Like start Christmas. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving too. Ate some serious food, went home like a bowl of constrictor. Wow. It's like one of Billy's mice eating snakes, and they just go to sleep. All right. So you want a break? You want to pause? Okay. All right. So lines are wide open. 303-696-1971. Good morning. I'm stumped. You know, you read these books and you listen to these guys talk that know what they're talking about, and they don't have answers. Tomorrow on the radio show, Elvis and the Colonel. That was a really good read. And a guy kind of protects the Colonel. How the Colonel found Elvis, and often this, and everything I've ever read about the Colonel, that he's a heel. But as they say, together, they built the most legendary partnership in show business. And that's really the truth. So Greg McDonald's with us tomorrow at 9 a.m. when the thing kicks off. All right, get us out of here. Lines are open. If you're trying to call the show and got a busy, pick it up. 303-696-1971.
Mostly sunny to partly sunny skies and fair weather today. Daytime high temperatures are going to be in the 40s, lows tonight teens and 20s, mid to upper 40s Saturday, 40s and 50s Sunday. So a dry stretch of weather today through the weekend here in Denver, and that trend continues. Likely going to be well into the 50s, lows 20s, and dry Monday through Wednesday and next week. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
At this hour, I'm Christina Ohio in Dallas, and here are your top stories. Franklin Graham is packing his bags one last time. Michael Harrington has more. At this hour, I'm Christina Ohio in Dallas, and here are your top stories. Franklin Graham is packing his bags one last time. Michael Harrington has more.
The popular evangelist will hold his final Overseas Gospel Festival of 2024 in Can Tho, Vietnam on December 3rd and 4th. Graham is teaming up with more than 200 Christian churches in the Mekong Delta to put on the two-day event at Can Tho Stadium. Graham says God loves the people of Vietnam. I look forward to sharing this message of hope, and I'm especially thankful to the leaders of this country for welcoming me back. Michael Harrington, SRN News.
More shoppers are using buy now, pay later plans heading into the holiday season as the ability to spread out payments looks attractive at a time when Americans still feel the lingering effect of inflation and have already had record high credit card debt. Experts say the short-term loans can lead consumers to overextend themselves and warn that those who use credit cards for the service face higher interest expenses. The data firm Adobe Analytics predicts shoppers will spend 11.4% more this holiday season than it did a year ago. A turkey in Maryland will live another day after he was pardoned from becoming part of Thanksgiving dinner. This after a group of elementary school students in Baltimore led the charge to save Ted. Ted was pardoned by the CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools. That's what you need to know at this hour. In Dallas, Christina Weil, Salem News Channel.
Here we go. Coming up on time on a Friday, November 29, 2024. Here's a question. Lines are open, 303-696-1971. Do you think one man killed Jack Kennedy? Lee Harvey Oswald. Do you think other people were involved? Do you think our government was involved? Anti-Castro Cubans, the CIA, recruited? What do you, I mean, legitimate, take us out of here with that. If you, after listening to all we listened to this morning, and that last honest man's wonderful, and of course, she's incredible, but just in your little, heart of hearts, this has been such a, it's one of the great, if not the greatest mystery, perhaps in this country's history. But ask yourself the official picture that is presented to you by the feds and by the establishment is one guy, this little defector from Soviet Union, who they lied to you about where he went and where he had been in Mexico. You've heard all the stories. Do you think one man with a $14 rifle killed John Kennedy? Or what do you think? Do you think others were involved? Now, if you're an old guy like me, it was the 23rd of November, 1963. This is the 29th of November, 24. Where were you when it hit? And according to, I read a piece one time about what people remember, and the Pearl Harbor. When Pearl Harbor happened, my mother's generation, my father's generation can tell you where they were when they heard Pearl Harbor had been attacked. Apparently also VE Day and VJ Day. They knew where they were. Moving ahead, believe it or not, Truman Dewey. Everyone thought that Truman would lose the election and he would be beaten by Dewey. And in fact, Truman wins. And that famous picture of him holding up the headline, Dewey beats Truman. People remember that. You can see this, the Kennedy assassination. And then I think it was Man on the Moon. I'm trying to remember. When the shuttle blew. And when Challenger blew, yeah. And when Reagan was shot. People remember they were. So if you run those down in your head as I spiel them off, you're going, oh yeah, I was there. And I'm trying to remember if there was anything since. Really that had impact. And so here we sit. Where were you when somebody said to you John Kennedy was dead or John Kennedy had been shot? Then ask the other ones as well. But the assassination of John Kennedy, November 22nd, I said 23rd, has spawned numerous conspiracy theories. These theories allege that the involvement of CIA, the involvement of the mob, the mafia, Vice President Lyndon Johnson takes a hit, Cuban Prime Minister Fidel Castro, the KGB, as Khrushchev said, we'd be fools to do it, or any combination of the individuals and entities. Some conspiracy theorists have alleged really a cover-up by the federal government. I tend to do that. I tend to see that the feds were really involved. The Warren Commission was a joke. The CIA, we just spent time talking about. Former Los Angeles DA, the district attorney in LA, talked about it. The Warren Commission, conspiracy theories, the impact of the assassination had profound effect on this country. The evidence, Wasn't much, was there? The role of the mob. And the mob, when you think about it, man, everybody thought the mob was in on it. And I still think the mob was in on it. So, Carlos Marcello. Okay, I'm just looked over at the phones. Here we go, coming up on time. Hey, Dick, thank you. You're on the radio show. It is a Friday.
It is Friday. And, well, let's see. My mother called the school when Cronkite took his glasses off, put them slowly on his desk, and the president had expired. She called the school, and I was in study hall. And, I mean, it was like, the kids, we really didn't know what to think. I mean, this was our first shock.
Yeah.
Schools were out. And then to add to that was Oswald being shot on live TV.
He was shot on a Sunday, I think. Maybe on a Saturday or Sunday, I forget.
Well, my kid brother had the TV on. I'm in the other room, and he goes, Oswald got shot.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, sure. And he goes, yeah, it was just
on a Sunday. He was shot. I was working, and so I was off. And my mother came up. My brothers and I all slept in one room. My mother came up and said, come down here. Oswald's been shot. Yeah, I agree with you. That was something, too.
Yeah. And then I just gotten off a canoe trip in Wisconsin, up in northern Wisconsin, and my roommate's mother woke us up and said, got some bad news. Bobby Kennedy was killed. And so I'm hitchhiking south. A new Cadillac swings over. And the guy said, can you drive? And I said, sure. I believe he was the district, for the state of Wisconsin, but he had been called to Washington. So he slid over. I drove. He went to sleep immediately, got down the interstate, and it was off. And I thought about that afterwards. That was a date as well. But I know I'm 77. You've got me by a few years. But when my daughter asked, Dad, what were the 60s like? Oof. Do you have some time?
Well, yeah, it starts there. I mean, the 60s don't begin until Jack Kennedy's assassinated. I mean, because 61, 2, they're still the 50s.
Yes.
The closed.
With no locked doors, not a locked car in my hometown.
No.
Kids actually played outside.
Yes.
So I started the 60s in 8th grade, ended the 60s, engaged to get married, went through the Kennedys, Dr. King, Vietnam, and a change in the college atmosphere. I mean, University of Wisconsin, my kid brother would go to class at night, drop his briefcase and crawl underneath the tear gas. Madison, the square is all boarded up. I'm up north, very little response up there, but Madison or Berkeley that was a change that the World War II guys never accepted. Hey, you got a duty, you go, you keep your mouth shut.
But it was
yada.
Again, the clash, the conflict and then the interesting thing. Then I got jammed up lines.
Yep,
Dick, it stopped that quick. Richard Nixon resigns. They signed this peace agreement. Music changes, clothing changes. There's no more radical anti-war, anti-America records. They're playing Kool and the Gang. Bell bottoms appear. The drugs change. Hairstyles change. It was over that quick. I don't see that happening right now. I don't see, okay, Trump won, we're going to drive on. Trump won, and they're gearing up, man.
These are confusing times.
That's why I'm saying, being an old guy. Thank you. Let's jump in on another one. This is Al. Hey, Al, good morning. I almost said good afternoon. Good morning. You're on the radio show.
Hi, Pete.
Hey, brother.
I'm 68 years old, and so I was like in second grade when Kennedy died. And for most of my life, I accepted the Warren Report story, as I think most of us did, because back then people were not as skeptical about our government.
You wanted to.
Yeah, it was the easy answer to what happened. One crazy guy gets a gun and decides to kill the president. However, about a year and a half ago, and I apologize, I haven't heard the whole show, but
that's cool.
About a year and a half ago, my wife and I listened to a podcast by Rob Reiner.
Oh yeah,
and I'm not sure. Did you listen to it?
I've listened to him. I've read him, actually. I should say that I never listened, but I've read him.
The podcast that he and I think Soledad O'Brien did is fantastic. It's really well researched. They dug up a lot of people from the time to talk about their roles, and it's so complicated. But the long and short of it is that the proof is there that this was not that Oswald was a patsy.
Oh, sure.
When he claimed to be a patsy, he was a patsy, and their bottom line was, although this isn't all totally provable, is that it was a combination of the CIA, the mafia,
organized crime,
and
anti-Castro Cubans,
and the exactly.
Yeah.
And so I after listening to that, and also listening to some other podcasts and some reading, I'm fully convinced that John Kennedy was killed by guys who wanted him out.
Yeah, if you go and you read, I mean, like I said, I get drawn to this in every new book I read. But there's something called the black gangs, and it has nothing to do with skin color. It just meant they were, out of the budgets. They were in the black side, and they were going into jails and recruiting. And they would get, and I don't mean to offend anybody, especially my friends, but they would get bikers, they would get Barney badasses, they would get, borderline psychotics, and they had them. And they were the black gangs, and they were planning so much stuff in Florida that it's hard to believe. Now here's my jump ahead. What are they doing now?
What do you mean?
Same bunch, same groups, same outlaws.
Oh, well, I tell you, in the time we grew up, like I said, people were much more willing to accept what they were being told.
Absolutely.
However, I think journalism was the journalists of the time, who are now a lot of them gone, or the whole media has changed so much. Well, there were better journalists who were willing to dig and look. Although, again, with the Kennedy situation, a lot of people either chose not to look or just to turn the other way and accept that the government would never do such a thing.
Remember, FDR couldn't walk.
Yeah.
Remember, FDR's girlfriend either dies in his arms or dies in, it depends on whose version of the story you listen to. He was having his portrait painted and he died. American people never knew that. American people, I was trying to make this case to Jeff and Billy, the first time American people saw the bodies of GIs in the Second World War was at Tarawa. And they saw some newsreels of, guys floating in Tarawa. They never saw that before. So,
well, and fast forward to Vietnam.
They showed it all the time.
The American public's view was changed.
No, that's it.
Based upon what the media showed us of what was actually going on and happening.
Yeah, the Zippo raids and everything that happened, and they showed it. I don't know. I mean, was it right not to, or was it wrong not to?
Well, in that case, because I think the Vietnam War was unjustified, an unjust war.
Of course.
the fact that we were shown what was going on, and it changed everything.
Technology was better, and then you turn around with Saddam, and you turn around each and every time. But I would wonder, and I got to pause. I would wonder if the Russian people see what's going on. Serious question.
I don't think so.
Thank you. I
don't think so. And that's they are fed a steady stream of propaganda.
Well,
most of it anti-West, and the question is how long. Because they're losing that struggle with Ukraine.
I was going to say,
they're losing a lot of people.
Putin keeps his thumb on it. I got to jump. Yeah. I love it. Right back after this on 710 KNUS. Coming up on time, back here tomorrow morning at 9. We'll take a look at this new book about Elvis and the Colonel. It is, weather's turning around a little bit outside. Says 43. We'll see it when we believe it. 18 tonight and back on a Saturday at 47 degrees. Go to Ed. Ed waited. Ed, thank you so much. And not good afternoon quite yet, but you're on the show. Thank you.
Hi, Peter. You once reviewed the book Best Evidence by James Lifton.
Yes.
Think of it.
Your phone, by the way, is cracking up. It's he got himself in trouble. I think he's the one that ended up with Harper Lee and her sister.
Oh, I didn't know. But the best evidence shed with.
Ed, do me a favor. Hang up real quick and call back real quick. I'll get you right on the air. You're fogging out on me, okay? Just I want you up. So get him back up as quick as you can. Save the date. Children's Hospital Toy Run, December the 8th, and tomorrow this is called Stalling. And tomorrow on the radio show at 9 o'clock when we come out of the box, Elvis and the Colonel. And I was always under the impression that the Colonel was a heel and he took advantage of Elvis. And this guy said, no, that's not true. But the Colonel knew how to gamble. That's not working. Get somebody up here. We'll get this Ed. Get Ed back. We got Ed back? Ed, no Moss Ed. Ed. All right. Anyhow, the Lifton's book, there's been, and this is why these are mysteries, and the assassination is I guess you could say a review of the hidden history, and people our age are drawn to it because we're looking for explanations for what happened in our lives. And killing Jack Kennedy was very cruel. It was a very shocking act. And there is, I believe, a secret history of explosive accounts of the Kennedy assassination that will rewrite the 20th century if, in fact, it ever gets to us. I think as that one fellow called and we said, who is it? And he said, organized crime. Of course, Jack owed organized crime. They helped him. Hell, they put him over. And that was the Giancanas and Tony Arcardo, the Big Tuna. And they did it for him. They did it, Carlos Marcello, Santos Trafficante. Do you think you're going to do something for or to those guys? And then, of course, Bobby Kennedy keeps the hammer down on all of them. And their bank is Jimmy Hoffa and the Teamsters. Then there's everything else that goes with it. He has made the deal for the missiles, and Khrushchev has missiles in Cuba. The United States has missiles in Turkey and in Greece, and they swap out. And Jack Kennedy's been doing something. Excuse me, because I'm just working off the top of my head. But Jack Kennedy does something called there's something called the Monroe Doctrine that says nobody comes into the hemisphere, and then something called the Truman Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. And he enacts all of that and says, you can't come here. Well, says Khrushchev, then you can't stay in Turkey and you can't stay in Greece, which is, again, the trade. So Jack Kennedy takes the missiles out of Turkey and out of Greece. Khrushchev takes the missiles out of Cuba. And Jack Kennedy pronounces that Fidel Castro has the right to be a recognized government in Cuba. That sets all the Alpha 66 Omega 7, sets all the anti-Castro Cubans off, and he guarantees there's a communist country now in the Western Hemisphere. They all are setups right now to blow the lid off of it. And they do. Organized crime wants back into Cuba. They want their casinos back. They want their prostitution back. They want to run the island. And it kind of is a series of things. The CIA doesn't want the Soviets there. And remember, Khrushchev gets dumped too. For the charge against Khrushchev was adventurism. He goes out to see a farm, comes back. Brezhnev's waiting for him with some pretty heavy-handed guys. And that's that. All right, everybody. Tomorrow morning at 9. I'll see you again. We'll do Elvis and the Colonel. Thank you, guys. Be safe.